When a snobby rich girl with killer curves dragged me in as her personal sparring dummy, she figured I would just eat dirt since I am a totally ordinary commoner. I hit her with that main character energy, literally pulling a Gojo, and asked just how hard I should flex to actually help her. She thought I was completely trolling, and dared me to bring the heat. The second the clock started, she chucked a basic trash tier spell right at my face, which I sidestepped like it was nothing, flexing that Gojo swag once again. I taunted her, asking if she was actually going to try. Fuming, she spammed a massive barrage of magic arrows, but I wiped them all out with one lazy bottom-tier spell. Catching on to the fact that I was not just some random scrub she locked in, blasting a relentless storm of fiery projectiles my way. Not even sweating it, I popped up a quick magic barrier, triggering a decent-sized blast. But true to her sneaky curve-blessed nature, she used the thick smoke cloud to her advantage, and lunged in for a totally desperate blindside strike. Spoiler alert, it ended terribly for her. But hey, let us rewind this tape back to day one. I lived my whole miserable life out in Ebelstein, crossing paths with this totally delusional, fibbing old dude. The guy could barely scrap together a 1-star spell, yet he flexed it 24/7. Plus, he would literally blow a fuse anytime the neighborhood kids messed with him. Surprisingly, he was the guy who hammered the magical basics into my brain, and officially kickstarted my wizarding grind. There was absolutely zero epic destiny involved. The old man just needed someone to fetch his groceries, and I desperately craved that mana knowledge. Seasons flew by fast with him, constantly dropping nuggets of wisdom. Then out of nowhere, I channeled pure mana straight through my veins. When my eyes snapped open, his jaw was literally on the floor. I let out and shaping it into a glowing arrow that instantly shredded a tree to splinters. That was basically my entire first year hanging with the grumpy old guy, grinding out endless chores just to secure that 1-star mage title. Then one random night, while he was totally wasted, he spilled that outside our borders. These insanely privileged noble kids were hitting 3 stars before they even blew out their teenage birthday candles. He swore a nameless nobody like me could never touch their level, warning me to keep my ego in check. He bet his life I would hit a massive roadblock the second I aimed for 2 stars. Dude never shut up about fancy bloodlines. He was constantly yapping about this impossible gap separating the elites from the dirt poor. Low-key, I started thinking he was just projecting massive insecurities. That specific night dragged on forever. When I rolled up the following morning, I found him totally lifeless, covered head to toe in brutal bruises. It was obvious he got jumped and pummeled until he stopped breathing. I always knew he had a habit of running his mouth, but the actual truth hit way harder. He got caught swiping a 2-star magic manual from a local storehouse, and the guards absolutely wrecked him. Literally no one could figure out why a frail dude running out of time would pull such a crazy stunt. Right then, a glowing blue system window randomly popped up in my face. It straight up told me to lock in my main magic class. Oh yeah, did I mention I got isekai'd here? Fast forward 4 whole years. That is exactly when Katia Flameheart entered the chat. She was the ex-boss lady of a completely ruined aristocratic family and an overpowered 3-star sorceress that basically every single guild was fighting to recruit. While chilling in my town, she picked up bounties through the Beldun mercenary crew and took me under her wing as her student. I soaked up insane amounts of knowledge. Honestly, most of those hardcore study sessions kicked off at this local pub named Beldun's Tier. In the middle of a serious lesson at that very bar, Katia dropped the fact that every magic user gets this crazy itch to level up their power. She looked me dead in the eye and said I actually had the insane talent to pull it off, but she quickly snapped that getting too thirsty for power would absolutely crash my progress. I promised her I would lock that advice in. Once she finished her rant, she ordered me to shut my eyes and completely tune into my magical core. She told me to vibe out, track down exactly where the energy sparked, map its rhythm, and visually project it out into the real world. I mirrored every single step she laid out. A massive surge of icy blue aura instantly erupted around me. She was totally mind-blown by the insanely cracked mana reserves hidden inside me. Not just that, but the flow was perfectly under control. I bet my life all those years of grinding basic spells finally paid off. But literally the millisecond I blinked open, a deafening boom rattled the horizon. The whole pub instantly devolved into pure madness. Bruisers scrambled for the exit violently, demanding to know who was attacking. Half the room panicked, thinking a raid was going down. Before I could even flinch, Katia snatched my wrist, whispering at me to zip it and trail her shadows. She dragged me into a pitch-black alleyway and ordered me to listen closely. She drilled it into my skull that the elites fiercely gatekept all their shiny privileges, and holding the ultimate monopoly on magic was their absolute. She broke it down, saying regular folks think being naturally gifted is a godsend, but that fantasy really only applies to the silver spoon kids. Then she laid out the brutal truth. A regular peasant breaking into the 3-star realm is basically a myth. Anyone from the dirt who somehow hacked their way up there had to sacrifice their entire existence just to grind out magic. Dropping her voice to a deadly whisper, she revealed that the stunt I just pulled off was straight up a 2-star illusion drop known as an auditory hallucination. Without even trying, I had casually unlocked my 2nd star, all while barely hitting 14 years old. From that moment on, Katia became my travel buddy, feeding me a completely stacked arsenal of wild spells. She also spilled all the tea about her toxic ex-high society life, exposing how those snobby aristocrats really operate behind closed doors. In the blink of an eye, an entire year evaporated. And just like that, Kadia had to bounce. The absolute powerhouses over in Alv County locked her down as their elite private tutor. The Alv family was not just rich, they were top-tier heavyweights in the empire. Even the royal Duke out in the capital bowed down to them, terrified of Count Alvador pulling the strings. Honestly, it was a massive career upgrade. She just could not fumble. Snagging a gig as the personal wizarding coach for an ultra-elite bloodline was the ultimate flex before we finally went our separate ways. She handed me a 2-star spellbook as a parting gift. Glancing over my stat screen, I realized I'd already built up a pretty solid arsenal. Fast forward 12 months of pure, sweaty grinding, and I had totally locked down 2 more 2-star spells. Hitting 16 felt like a milestone. But I wasn't about to hit the brakes anytime soon. Cruising into the mercenary hub one afternoon, Jaden, the absolute boss of the Belden crew, hyped me up saying we finally bagged a legit high-tier gig. When I asked for the details, he dropped a bombshell. It was from House Duplain of the Grand Duchy. I was genuinely floored. Why would top-tier royals slum it with grunts like us? Jaden instantly snapped back, saying the why didn't matter as long as the cash cleared. According to him, the Duplains were throwing around cash like confetti. Plus, he hyped up the fact that rubbing elbows with them could seriously unlock some massive VIP networking, so I pressed him on the actual mission. Jaden totally played it down, claiming it was nothing crazy, just wiping out some trash mobs stalking the edge of the Duke's land. Honestly, that answer just set off massive red flags. A powerhouse family like the Duplains wouldn't need a scrappy mercenary crew to swat away a few low-level beasts. Hearing that, I immediately stood up and made a beeline for the exit. I gave Jaden a hard pass on the contract, causing him to frantically holler at me to wait. I told him to tag someone else and reminding him I don't touch sketchy side quests. Jaden let out a heavy sigh, muttering that he would have loved to solo this run himself. But the clients strictly demanded a mage. Since spellcasters were practically going extinct in the mercenary scene, I was literally the only option. I still wasn't buying it. Needing magic to squash a few random monsters just made the whole thing smell even fishier. That is when Jaden casually flicked a solid gold coin right at me as a down payment. Suddenly, I was all ears for the rest of his pitch. Cold hard cash has a funny way of shifting my perspective. A little while later, the trio showed up. One was rocking a heavy hood that completely cloaked her face. Jaden formally introduced our clients, but the grumpy old dude in the group instantly threw a fit. He sized me up and loudly complained that I was a literal kid. He barked at Jaden, saying he expected someone way more intimidating. Jaden totally backed me up, heavily insisting that I was the sickest spellcaster in his entire roster. The old guy still wasn't having it, but right as he turned to ditch us, the hooded girl leaned in and murmured something into his ear. Whatever she whispered worked like magic, flipping his mood instantly. Before long, we rolled out to the open plains to start the hunt. The gig itself was a breeze. A mob of goblins spawned in, and I completely wrecked them, flawlessly mixing my magic with raw combat skills. I ripped through their front line so fast they didn't even have time to blink. In record time, those goblins were reduced to a pile of lifeless bodies. Afterward, the royal handler hyped me up for wiping out the horde at speedrun pace, with the mission officially in the bag. I strolled right back to the tavern. The second my boots hit the floorboards, Palin started screaming my ear off. She went in on me, calling me a total corporate sellout. She aggressively reminded me that no matter the situation, we never simp for snobby elites. Jaden just chilled and casually dropped that the gig paid insanely well. That hooked her attention real fast. She aggressively demanded to know my exact payout. The absolute second she heard I bagged a solid gold coin, her whole vibe did a 180. She started hollering that she needed a spot on the next raid, swearing she would happily crawl under a royal's legs for that kind of bag. Jaden loudly clapped back, telling her to zip it. He dryly reminded her that crawling under a noble's legs was definitely not in the job description. Eventually, Palin knocked back enough drinks to pass out cold. Once the tavern finally chilled out, Jaden leaned in and asked how the run actually went. I told him it was a total cakewalk. I just blitzed a few goblins, and before I could even break a sweat, the quest was completely over. Jaden totally agreed. The clients gave off toxic vibes at first, but he had to admit, their pockets were undeniably deep. I gave him that much. But man, the entire setup still felt incredibly sus. My gut was screaming that they were burying a massive secret. I explained to Jaden how the handler specifically claimed he was hunting for youth, endurance, and major charisma. The hilariously dark truth, I barely checked any of those boxes. I also brought up the chick, who claimed to be a basic kitchen maid, yet her hands were way too pristine for someone scrubbing pots for a living. I was about to drop a few more glaring red flags when Jaden completely shut me down. He bluntly reminded me that we are hired guns, not detectives. Our flow is simple: take the gig, wipe the targets, secure the bag, and ghost. Honestly, I couldn't even argue. Reality is brutal, and keeping my pockets heavy was way more important than playing detective. Bright and early the next day, I jumped back in to wipe out another goblin squad. Once the dust settled, Jaden practically sprinted to the clients for our payout. When they handed over 2 solid gold coins, the guy lost his absolute mind from the hype. Honestly, I couldn't even blame him. Right after the royal handler stepped right up to me. He said he loved my combat style and wanted to slide me an exclusive solo quest. He leaned in, asking if I was down. Jaden and I just exchanged blank stares. But the old guy totally ditched the polite small talk and dropped the real bomb. The payout: 15 gold coins. Bro. The second that number hit my ears, I locked it in. I didn't even care what the gig was. Look, don't judge me, 15 gold coins talks. Next thing you know, we pull up to the massive Dupain estate. Jaden's jaw literally hit the floor looking at this insanely cracked mansion. Right before we stepped inside, the old dude blocked our path. He hit us with the hold-up time for the real introductions. Plot twist: his name was Dawn, and he was actually the head steward running Duke Dupain's entire household. He gave a quick apology for playing undercover, claiming his high-tier job required total secrecy. Then the woman stepped up, Katarina. Turns out she wasn't some random kitchen staffer. She was literally the head maid bossing the whole place around. Jaden completely panicked, aggressively bowing and stuttering out his name. Me, I was totally unbothered. I already sensed they were faking their levels. But the real tea, I knew the hooded girl rolling with them was holding major VIP status. A second later, she throws off her hood. Finally, I get a crystal clear look at her. Flashing a radiant smile, she drops her name. Aline Eleanor Dupain. Then she spilled the actual reason she dragged me all the way out here. She wanted me to be a magic tutor for her little sister Della. Bro, my brain just blue screened. A total nobody commoner like me coaching a high-class noble. Yeah, that is not exactly a normal Tuesday. While my brain was still buffering from that massive lore drop, things were getting wildly chaotic on the other side of the mansion. Tucked away in his office, Duke Dupain was having a serious sit-down with his oldest son, Valerian. Suddenly, bam. His other son, Reg, kicks the door open, looking absolutely unhinged. The Duke instantly barked at him to chill out. Reg clapped back, yelling that Della was the one acting crazy. He raged that she crossed the line and was literally throwing hands with the servants he hired. Valerian hissed at his brother to lower his volume, warning him not to ruin their dad's ultra-important meeting. Reg did not even care. He screamed at the Duke that 10 staff members had already rage quit this month because Della was acting like a total menace. Apparently, she was just smashing expensive stuff for fun. Then Reg stared his dad dead in the eyes and demanded to know how long he was going to pretend this was not happening. Valerian finally snapped and ordered Reg to get out, but Reg stood his ground. Instead, he boldly argued that they should just toss Della out, since Aline was already the golden child. The Duke instantly shot him down, growling that Reg had zero authority to make that call. Reg kept running his mouth anyway. He revealed Dawn had already scouted a remote monastery to dump her in. Honestly, he thought forcing her into becoming a nun was way better than letting her drag the family's stats down. The second those words left his lips, yeah, he completely crossed the line. The Duke shot up, grabbed Reg, and slammed his face straight into the desk. With pure venom, he warned his son that Della's fate was absolutely not his to decide. But even with a bruised face, Reg was not backing down. Pushing past his dad's killer intent, he spat out that they would have to deal with Della sooner or later. Meanwhile, Aline and I were venturing way deeper into this massive fortress. As we walked, she asked if any rumors about Della had reached me. I just told her I had only spotted the name in the Dupain family database. Aline dropped her gaze. Her whole vibe instantly shifted to depressing. In a hushed tone, she admitted Della was basically a ghost to the outside world. As we navigated the giant hallways, we randomly bumped into Valerian and Reg. Valerian gave Aline a quick nod, asking about her time chilling in Ebelstein. Keeping it classy, Aline thanked him, saying his backing made it super comfy. Valerian just nodded, saying they would spill the tea later because he desperately needed to go patch up Reg's busted face. A few minutes later, Aline and I stepped into the Duke's den. She gave her dad a sweet hello, and he immediately flexed that he already knew about her insane achievements in Ebelstein. Smiling like an angel, she deflected the hype right back to him. Then she gestured to me, pitching me as the new magic tutor she dragged over from the city, confirming I was the one hired to fix Della. Introductions done, Aline smoothly dipped out, claiming she did not want to ruin her dad's workflow. I was totally ready to bolt with her, but the Duke commanded me to stay put. Once the door clicked shut, the old man just scanned me like a hawk. He straight up told me my low age was a shocker. Then leaning in, he grilled me on whether my magic stats were actually decent. I played it super humble, claiming I only knew a tiny bit of one-star spells. Bro. The Duke slowly took off his glasses, and the aura in the room instantly turned lethal. He growled that faking it was pointless, acting humble was not going to score me any points here. The second those words dropped, reality hit me like a truck. I was literally standing toe-to-toe with a 5-star mage. A beast at that level could easily see through my pathetic attempt at hiding my true power. I immediately backpedaled, apologizing if I sounded arrogant. The Duke just waved his hand, muttering that he got why I kept my guard up. Then he ruthlessly roasted me, saying based on my young face and ragged outfit, I definitely did not give off pro-magic tutor vibes. So I dropped the act. I told him straight up, I am a mercenary. The Duke just gave a slow nod. He decided not to dig into my shady past simply because Aline handpicked me herself. Since she vouched for me, he was willing to blindly trust her radar. He tossed me the clearance to enter the isolated annex where Della was locked away. Next step, a maid would walk me over. But right as he was about to kick me out of his office, I stopped him. I looked him dead in the eye. There was one thing I desperately needed to ask. The Duke finally gave me the green light to speak up. I looked him dead in the eye and reminded him of one basic fact. I was a mercenary paid to tutor Della in magic and groom her for high society. The Duke raised an eyebrow, wondering why I was stating the obvious. That is when I dropped the bomb. I had a specific condition for taking this job. Cut to the other side of the mansion where Della was absolutely terrorizing her personal maid. She was chucking every object in sight across the room while the terrified girl just kept bowing and begging for mercy. Della shrieked at the top of her lungs, ordering her to get out. She even swore she would completely wreck the poor girl's face if she ever dared to step foot in that room again. Meanwhile, Jaden was cornering Aline with some tough questions. He really wanted to know why she picked me out of everyone else. In his eyes, top-tier magic tutors would literally kill for a chance to teach a Dupain family member. Plus, he totally called out the massive power dynamic, pointing out that I would have a brutal time handling Della since I was just a street-level commoner, and she was a spoiled noble. But Aline spilled the tea. She confessed that she had already headhunted the most elite magic instructors across the entire continent. And guess what? Every single one of them threw in the towel. That forced her to completely switch up her game plan. Sure, she knew I was just a gun for hire, but she noticed I had a weirdly deep grip on high society etiquette. Jaden quickly connected the dots. He dropped the lore that my old mentor used to be a highly respected noble before crashing hard from grace. I had basically soaked up all that high-class knowledge from them. Suddenly, it all clicked for Aline. It made total sense why I acted so polished and polite despite my rough background. She honestly thought I would use soft, gentle parenting to turn Della around. Jaden just busted out laughing at that. He flat out told Aline her vibe check was completely broken. He reminded her that I was a rogue mage who literally grew up in the gutter taking on bloody mercenary contracts before I was even a legal adult. He hit her with a reality check. Did she seriously believe a kid raised in that brutal environment could survive? On good manners and positive vibes alone. Shortly after that chat, a maid led me straight to the annex. I knocked on Della's door, but all I got was crickets, so I just barged right in. I smoothly introduced myself and bowed to the bratty noble I was paid to babysit. Della was lounging across the room. When I walked in, she motioned for me to step closer. I played along, but with every step I took, her evil little smirk grew wider. The second I was in the strike zone, boom, she completely drenched me with a bucket of the most foul, toxic-smelling water imaginable. Then she had the nerve to laugh in my face and call me a filthy sewer rat. But she was not done yet. She literally hopped onto her chair just so she could physically look down on me to assert dominance. Grabbing a second bucket, she dumped even more nasty sludge over my head, bragging about how she prepped this little trap just for me. I did not flinch. I just stood there dead silent until her ammo ran dry. Seeing me completely unfazed totally triggered her. She lashed out, kicking me right in the chest and sending me stumbling back. Then she ripped off her shoe and whipped it straight at my head. Plunking back down into her fancy chair, she spat out that I was just trash from the gutter and needed to know my place. What this brat did not know was that I had already locked in a deal with Duke Dupain. I had warned him that fixing Della's rotten attitude was going to be a massive headache. That was exactly why I demanded absolute unchecked authority over her training. Cut back to reality. I smacked her right across the face. The crisp sound echoed like a gunshot through the room. Della just stood there completely paralyzed by shock. Seeing her brain short-circuit instantly sparked a memory of a chat I had with Katya 3 years ago. Back when we were on the road, I asked her how she would handle a student who completely pushed back against kindness. She gave this super sweet answer about trying to deeply understand them, hugging it out, and showing infinite patience. I immediately called her out, saying that sounded way too Disney Channel. So I pressed harder, asking what the game plan was if the kid was just straight up toxic. Katya just smiled softly and dropped some wisdom. She said the whole point of teaching is to drag someone onto the right path no matter what. If the soft era of understanding and peace completely failed, the teacher just had to flip the script. When I asked her to translate that, she gave me a brutally honest answer. She told me to make absolutely sure the student was terrified of ignoring my orders. Snapping back to the present, I glared at Della and gave her a cold lecture about basic human respect. Then I ordered her to stand up. Making it crystal clear, I hate repeating myself. Shaking with pure rage, she scrambled up and slapped me right across the cheek, screaming about how a dirty commoner dared to touch a noble. Before she could even finish her little tantrum, I slapped her again. Even harder this time. I looked her dead in the eye, and coldly stated that I also hate making other people repeat themselves. But then, plot twist, Della suddenly grinned. She genuinely thought she had just caught me in a massive trap. She started screaming bloody murder, calling for Dawn, and crying assault. Literally seconds later, Dawn and a squad of panicked maids busted through the door. They immediately swarmed Della, freaking out and asking if she was okay. Dawn then whipped his head toward me, absolutely furious, and demanded to know what the hell was going on. He aggressively asked if I had a death wish for laying a finger on a Dupain. He threatened me with absolute destruction once the Duke found out about this mess. I did not even say a word. I just calmly pulled a piece of parchment from my coat. It was an official contract personally signed in ink by Duke Dupain himself. The document handed me absolute 100% authority over Della and her training. Checkmate. The note literally gave me a free pass to handle the situation however I wanted. One glance at that paper and Dawn's cocky expression completely vanished. The Duke's signature was dead center. His hands were tied, and word of the absolute chaos I caused spread through the estate like wildfire. When Valerian caught wind of the drama, he practically kicked down my door. The dude lunged at me, grabbing my collar, totally ready to deck me. But before he could swing, Reg physically intercepted him. He yanked Valerian back, warning him that throwing hands wouldn't fix a thing, and told him to chill out so we could talk this out like adults. Brushing myself off, I kept my voice ice cold and dropped the bomb. Duke Duplan himself gave me the green light for every single thing I did. Reg totally backed my play, giving Valerian a harsh reality check that I was still Aline's personal guest. Jumping me would drag the entire family's reputation through the mud. Plus, their own dad literally signed off on my extreme teaching methods. Defeated Valerian ordered me to follow him while telling Reg to stay put. As I stepped out into the hall, Reg pulled me aside for a quick whisper. He confessed he knew exactly what went down, and honestly, he thought Della desperately needed someone to smack a hardcore reality check into her. Giving my shoulder a solid pat, he told me not to sweat it. Valerian might be all bark, but he wasn't going to pull anything crazy. Even so, the frustration radiating off Reg was super obvious. Deep down, it pissed him off that Valerian kept acting like Della's shield after all the toxic stunts she pulled. A couple of tense minutes later, Valerian pushed open the door to Della's old bedroom back before she got banished to the annex. Canvases absolutely completely covered the walls. Valerian scanned the dusty space, his voice softening as he explained that Della used to be obsessed with art. He remembered how she used to drag him in here just to show off her sketches. Every time he hyped her up, she would get super flustered, turning tomato red from the compliments. Stepping closer to inspect the canvases, something felt totally off. Not a single painting in this room was actually finished. Valerian sighed, explaining that Della had this weird habit of leaving huge blank spots, only painting the exact details that caught her vibe. After a heavy, awkward pause, he finally swallowed his pride and apologized for attacking me. I waved it off, telling him we were good. Then cutting straight to the chase, I asked why we were having a heart-to-heart in a dusty art studio. Sweeping his gaze across the room one last time, his tone turned desperate. He needed me to realize that Della wasn't some pure evil brat who deserved to be hated or abused. She actually used to be sweet, but somewhere along the line she got completely brainwashed by the toxic obsession with pure bloodlines and high society status. That messed up mindset slowly poisoned her personality, turning her so unbearable that she got permanently kicked out of the main mansion and locked away in the annex. Staring at the floor, Valerian admitted he was clueless about what exactly triggered her villain arc. But no matter what, he was hardcore committed to saving her from being exiled to some miserable remote monastery. His master plan, If Della could manage to cast just basic one-star magic, he was confident he could guilt-trip their dad into letting her stay in the family. Dropping all his pride, he practically begged me to save his little sister. While he was pouring his heart out, my eyes drifted to a messy pile of books on the floor, and something caught my attention. I flipped a page, pointing out that Della had aggressively scribbled notes and theories all over the margins. Despite her attitude, she clearly hadn't given up on. Scanning the back shelves, I realized her entire collection consisted of heavy theory textbooks from the School of Regulations. Nodding slowly, Valerian confirmed I hit the nail on the head. He explained that basically every elite noble used the school. After analyzing her messy study habits, I gave him a slight nod and promised I'd do what I could. Cut to midnight, Della was completely dead to the world, snoring softly in her Enter me carrying a massive bucket of ice-cold water. Splash. 2 seconds later, she was violently awake, sputtering and screaming. I just stood there ordering her to get on her feet. She glared at me like I had straight up lost my mind. Totally tuning out her screeching, I grabbed her wrist in an iron grip and dragged her out the door. Her brain was literally short-circuiting as I ruthlessly hauled her down the dimly lit mansion hallways. The night shift maids stood frozen in absolute disbelief. Half of them looked traumatized while the other half looked, but surprise, surprise, not a single one dared to intervene. I kept marching her right out the front doors, dragging her deep into the pitch-black woods surrounding the estate. Once the mansion was out of sight and we were surrounded by creepy trees, I finally released my grip, tossing her unceremoniously into the dirt. Scrambling up instantly, Della unleashed absolute fury. She screamed at the top of her lungs, demanding to know if I was a psychopath and asking who the hell I thought I was to be her tutor. I locked eyes with her and dropped a truth bomb she was definitely not ready for. I flat out told her I literally couldn't care less about teaching her a single spell. Leaning in, I confessed the real reason I took this gig. I absolutely thrived on terrorizing arrogant, spoiled nobles. The second those words left my lips, her face completely drained of color. She stared blankly, like her brain refused to process the audio. Smirking, I casually added that the whole Magic Tutor title was just a super convenient cover story. As far as I was concerned, my actual job description was ripping entitled rich kids off their high horses and slamming them into reality. She still had this nervous look, desperately hoping I was just pulling a sick prank. That tiny shred of hope vanished the exact millisecond my steel sword cleared its scabbard. Swinging the blade lazily, I casually muttered that hearing high and mighty nobles scream for their lives was insanely satisfying. Right then and there, the reality of the danger finally clicked in her head. Trembling, she backed up, stammering out a threat, asking if I seriously thought I'd make it out of here alive after pulling a stunt like this. I let out a dark chuckle, guaranteeing her my safety was 100% locked in. After all, she was already practically packing her bags for a permanent vacation at a creepy monastery. Even if she went crying to Daddy, nobody in that mansion was going to take her seriously anymore. And hey, I told her with a massive grin, if I accidentally went too far, I could always just say I was sorry. Basically, my peasant life wasn't worth squat anyway. I flashed her a totally unhinged smirk that definitely made the whole vibe way worse. I casually dropped that ditching town was totally on the table, seeing as she was her family's biggest walking disaster. Honestly, they'd probably throw me a parade for taking out the trash, before totally forgetting I even breathed. That was the exact second a massive reality check slammed into her. Della fully realized she was about to get flatlined. Without a single peep, she spun around and bolted. It didn't take long for her to figure out that booking it back to the mansion was a massive dead end, since I'd literally grab her in 2 seconds flat. So she pivoted and went sprinting straight. Turns out she knew this terrain like the back of her hand. Her game plan: ditch me in the thick thicket and loop back to her safe zone. Judging by the absolute murder in her eyes, she was already dreaming up. Too bad for her I wasn't playing along. A crackling fireball sparked into existence right in the palm of my hand. Just seeing that flame left her completely paralyzed. Fireball was straight up 2-star magic. Her face was screaming one giant panicked question. How the heck was a low-tier merc flexing 2-star spells? Before her brain could even process the math, I let the spell rip. I purposely aimed wide. The flames detonated off to the side with a deafening boom. The shockwave rattled the entire forest, practically jolting her soul straight out of her body. When she whipped her head around, I was just standing there grinning. Guess that psycho smile hit way harder than. Della scrambled onto her feet and hauled out of there. But a few seconds later, she ate absolute dirt, face planting hard into the soil. Before she could even brush off the dust, razor-sharp ice arrows started whistling past her head, every single one barely grazing her by mere inches. One icy bolt slammed into the mud dead center in front of her nose. The message was loud and clear. If I wanted her dead, she'd already be a goner. I hollered over and hyped up her sprint speed. Honestly, not a bad hustle for a spoiled rich kid who spent her entire life cooped up indoors. Della completely ghosted me and kept pushing, but her stamina gauge was rapidly flashing red. The further she pushed, the more glaringly obvious it became that zero escape routes existed. Meanwhile, I downshifted my pace and scoped out the scenery. This weirdly gave me major déjà vu, and then it totally clicked. This was the exact same aesthetic from Della's canvas. She had been roaming these specific woods since she was a little kid. Without even clocking it, she had been vibrating with the forest's raw mana, pouring all that untamed energy straight into her brushstrokes. I was still connecting the dots when a blur of motion zipped behind my back. Della had pulled a massive U-turn. She came bulldozing at me, gripping a heavy rock high above her head, totally dead set on caving my skull in. I countered on reflex. Flicking the broadside of my blade, I smacked the rock clean out of her grip. The stone went flying and Della crumpled into a heap on the forest floor. Peering down at her, I had to give her props. Her sheer willpower was honestly top tier. 99% of people would have just kept running blindly. But she did the math, so she chose violence instead. That took some serious guts. I told her straight up that pulling a wild stunt like that couldn't have been an easy call. She was completely gassed. Her legs were literally jelly. Pointing the tip of, I asked if she wanted to drop any famous last words. Even on death's door, Della's ego refused to shatter. She tilted her chin up and flat out stated she was absolutely not saying sorry. In her twisted logic, high society elites do not bow down to street rats. I finally asked her why she was so insanely hyper-fixated on her precious pedigree. For the first time ever, she dropped the snobby attitude. She admitted that if you... Then she violently punched the dirt. Bawling her eyes out, she snapped at me asking if I seriously thought she never tried to awaken her magic. She confessed she had grinded for it 1,000,000 times over. But no matter how brutally she pushed herself, she always got zero results. Della spilled her guts, saying that if you subtracted the magic and the art, she had zero identity left to claim. The absolute only flex she had left to her name was that shiny, aristocratic title. If that vanished too, she truly believed she'd be utterly worthless trash. I breathed out a heavy, exhausted sigh. Then I readied my blade. I told her the therapy session was over. I called it this was the grand finale. Then I brought the steel crashing down. Della squeezed her eyes shut. A few tense seconds ticked by. Absolutely nothing happened. Blinking open her eyes in pure shock. A freezing ice shield had materialized completely around her. My sword hit an invisible wall the exact millisecond it touched the frost. But the craziest plot twist wasn't even the shield. It was the source code of the magic. The pure energy spawning that ice was radiating straight out of Della's own core. She just stared at it, absolutely mind-blown. Meanwhile, I gave her a huge shout-out for pulling it off and said my bad for acting so toxic earlier. Honestly, right then, Della looked way more blue-screened than relieved. I broke it down for her. What she just sparked might not officially count as a certified spell yet. Technically speaking, it was just raw mana flexing its muscle. But that did not ruin the epic part. She actually did the impossible. And then, she just shrieked. After grinding through absolute hell. All that insane rage, sweet relief, utter confusion, and pure shock just avalanche crashed onto her all at once. Once she finally wrapped up her crying session, I played medic and patched up all those nasty scrapes she caught while I made super sure she was chilling comfortably and set up to heal like a champ. As I patched up her busted leg deep in the woods, I decided to drop a massive truth bomb on her. I broke it down for her. She was a natural-born wild school mage. Most stuck-up royals get shoved into the rigid regulations school. It's the classic boring path for high society. But honestly, all magic schools end up at the exact same finish line anyway. Then I pointed out her massive glitch. She'd been busting her brain trying to force regulations magic. Even though her soul was totally wired for the wilds, that whole strategy was basically a train wreck waiting to happen. Squinting at me, Della asked how I figured out her true magical vibe. I told her it was obvious she could literally feel mana pulsing through the environment. And without even trying, she bled that raw energy straight onto her canvas. That was the secret sauce making her artwork pop off the page. Wild school prodigies usually start picking up on nature's frequency when they're barely out of diapers. Most of them are totally clueless about it too. Tying off the last bandage, I dusted off my knees and stood up. "You're good to go," I told her. But before we moved, I hit her with one last reality check. Actually, sparking mana for the first time is a massive milestone. I promised Della that tomorrow we'd start unlocking her aura the right way. Shocker, she actually muttered a thank you. After recovering from that plot twist, I suggested, we trek back to the mansion. Walking back, I casually brought up that sunset piece chilling in her old bedroom. I admitted it was an absolute banger of a painting. Flushing red, Della shyly confessed it was her absolute pride and joy. She even dropped the detail, that I was literally the first soul to know it was completely finished. Fast forward to the next morning, Della snapped awake, and instantly tried to flex her magic again. Dead silence. She tried over and over but got absolutely nothing. Boiling with frustration, She stomped out of bed and threw open her door. The second her foot hit the hallway, she totally crashed into a maid, hauling a heavy bucket. Splash. The poor girl dumped ice-cold water all over Della, realizing she just drenched the local terror. The maid's face turned ghost white. She crashed to her knees, hyperventilating and begging for mercy. Plot twist of the century, Della just sighed, told her to watch her step, and calmly strutted away. The maid literally froze like a statue. Seconds later, a squad of panicked maids swarmed her, checking for injuries. Still, shell-shocked, the wet maid whispered that Della just gave a chill warning and dipped. The whole crew's jaws dropped to the floor. Cut back to me heavily enjoying my beauty sleep. Suddenly my door was practically being hammered off its hinges. Guess Della decided my sleep schedule was officially cancelled. Delron caught the chaos and desperately tried to pacify her, begging her to act like a proper lady. Groaning, I finally cracked the door open, eyes half glued shut. What now? I mumbled. Della didn't skip a beat, demanding I instantly teach her how to weaponize her new mana. Hearing the word mana, Delron short-circuited entirely. Honestly, I was way more stressed about being awake before noon. Instead of playing sensei, I slammed the door in her face, mumbled, "Come back this afternoon," and face-planted back into bed. Della lost her mind. She spent a solid 20 minutes punching my door and screaming at me to open up. I tuned out the temper tantrum. Getting my solid 8 hours of sleep was absolutely non-negotiable. Later on, Reg accidentally eavesdropped on the maids gossiping about Della's brand new vibe. The juicy drama spread like wildfire across the whole mansion. It wasn't long before Valerian dropped the nuke on Duke Duplan. Della had successfully sparked magic. Since this intel came straight from the head butler, nobody could brush it off as fake news. You could practically see the stress melt off the Duke's face. Reg, though, total buzzkill. He snapped that everyone was popping champagne way too early. Sure, unlocking mana was a huge flex, but it didn't magically delete her toxic track record. Valerian instantly bristled. He was totally baffled why Reg was acting like a hater when Della had finally secured a massive win. Reg shot back that one lucky break. Wasn't going to cancel their backup plan of shipping her off to a nunnery. The brutal debate flatlined right there, with both brothers standing their ground. Fast forward to that afternoon, I figured it was finally time to kick off the ultimate magic boot camp. I tracked her down, catching her brooding in a corner like a dark storm cloud. I casually poked the bear, asking why she was pouting. Della instantly flared up aggressively, claiming she wasn't pouting. She was enraged. Naturally, I kept pressing her buttons. I smirked and told her that rebranding a temper tantrum doesn't magically fix the vibe. My sarcasm pushed her right to the boiling point. Finally snapping, she leaped off the bench and shrieked that she was furious. But the second my face went ice cold, she instantly froze and fixed her posture. Guess my earlier trauma teaching actually left a scar. Good to know. Pulling up a chair, I laid down the law. Just because she unlocked the juice didn't mean she could start blasting spells like a maniac. Going 0 to 100 would literally blow up in her face. Trust me, I told her I've got the trauma to prove it. Grinding is crucial, but chilling out is half the battle. And since she'd done enough whining and resting, it was time to lock in. Della hit me with a massive eye roll and called me an absolute buzzkill. Staring down her deadpan, totally uptight expression, I straight up asked if she wanted a less boring vibe for our lessons. Instantly, her mind flashed back to the absolute chaos that went down in the forest. Panicking at the thought of a round 2, she snapped her attitude right into check. I dropped the agenda. Today's grind was all about manifesting mana. Once she could flex her aura on command, blasting 1-star spells would be an absolute breeze. I broke it down for her. The School of the Wild ditches the strict rulebook, making it top tier for solo grinding. Unlike the stuffy School of Regulations, it's all about pure freedom and gut instinct. I hyped her up, saying her chaotic energy was literally a perfect match for this style. Della tilted her head, totally lost. I spelled it out. Her rebellious, unhinged personality perfectly clicked with the wild arts. Plus, she was rocking that premium Dupin family bloodline. Hate to break it to her, but she was practically dripping with raw talent. Cue the aggressive blush. Homegirl looked utterly shook that I was actually handing out compliments. I didn't stutter, throwing up a massive ice shield purely on instinct while fighting for her life. That's some next-level prodigy behavior. She puffed out her chest, ready to crown herself a certified genius, but I instantly humbled her. Having insane potential doesn't automatically make you a mastermind. Della wasn't having it, though. In her mind, those two things were basically identical. Meanwhile, Reg was creeping in the shadows, watching our dynamic duo. And let me tell you, his jealousy was spiking off the charts, seeing Della level up. Cut to the next morning, Della violently kicked my door open before my brain even booted up. She aggressively flexed that she could summon mana on the spot. Just one tiny little issue: she had absolutely zero steering wheel for it. Over the next few days, her power scaling went crazy. She was unlocking new skills daily, vibrating with pure hype every single time. Fast forward to a lazy afternoon. I dipped out of the annex, chilling under a tree with the heavy tome Dupin had shoved onto me. I was soaking in 5 seconds of precious silence until Bam Della spawned. With hands on her hips, she interrogated me, demanding to know if her dad gifted me that book just so I could dodge my actual job. I hit her with a deadpan yes. Honestly, slacking off was the whole point of this masterpiece. Della zeroed out my excuses. She locked onto my arm and physically dragged me back to base just to flex her newest magical party trick. Sometime later, Valerian slid into my DMs with a formal summons. I rolled up to his quarters where he politely gestured for me to grab a chair. After some painfully polite small talk, he cut to the chase and grilled me. I gave him the rundown. She was grinding hard, but dominating one-star magic was still gonna take a minute. Valerian gave a slow nod. Then he dropped some lore. His mom was out flexing at some high society gala, but she'd be crashing back home next week. The temperature in the room plummeted. He sternly warned me to watch my back around her since most snobby elites absolutely despise seeing a random commoner snagging a VIP role. He locked eyes with me, making sure I caught his drift. I promised I'd keep my radar on. Then I flipped the script and asked why he actually dragged me here. Cue the dramatic pacing. Valerian drifted to the window, staring into the distance. He went into full monologue mode about being the future boss of House Dupin. To him, that meant his ultimate mission was to protect and carry every single family member. And to pull that off, he needed to be totally authentic. But here was the glitch. Human emotions were a chaotic mess. People's hidden agendas, messy cravings, and weird morals were basically an unsolvable puzzle. He sighed, whining that life would be on easy mode if everyone just had a hive mind. Too bad reality doesn't work like that. At this point, my brain was totally buffering. I slammed the brakes on his TED Talk and asked him to just spit it out. Valerian's noble mask finally shattered. Looking devastated, he confessed that Della was straight up ghosting him. Actual tears welled up in his eyes as he trauma dumped about their golden childhood days. He sobbed about how baby Della used to sprint up to him with the brightest, most adorable smile. Now he was left agonizing over where his sweet little sister went, and if he'd ever get that bond back. Suddenly, he marched right into my personal space, eyes completely red, begging for a cheat code to win back Della's affection. He claimed the solution was obvious. After all, I was the only guy Della actually listened to. Speak of the devil, I could literally hear her screaming my name outside. I tried to bail, but Valerian intercepted me. He whipped out a handmade doll he'd crafted for her, showing it off like a proud dad. Just one massive yikes, this thing didn't look like a cute present. It looked straight out of a horror movie. I literally had to ask if he was trying to gift her or cast a hex on her bloodline. Valerian instantly crumpled, swallowing back another wave of tears. He miserably admitted he was totally useless at this sibling bonding stuff. Cut to a bit later. Della's mom finally rolled back into town. She glided up to me, dripping with fake sweetness, hyping up my teaching skills like I was a VIP. After the fancy introductions, she casually offered to send a lavish gift to my family's estate. And right there, I had to drop the bomb. I flat out told her I had zero ties to any fancy noble house. Her polite smile glitched in utter confusion, so I decided to stop playing games and hit her with the raw truth. I'm just a commoner. The second that word dropped, she froze like a statue. Flashback to a week earlier. Aline wrapped up her goodbyes, incredibly grateful for everything I had pulled off so far. She dropped the news that she was heading straight back to Ebelstein. That meant Della was officially my problem now. Jaden swung by to dip out too, and in classic Jaden fashion, he spent his entire farewell roasting me. He warned me to speedrun this tutoring gig and haul my butt back to Ebelstein. If Pauline found out what went down, she would absolutely lose her mind. With the goodbyes out of the way, their carriage hit the road. But they were already miles away when a massive detail suddenly clicked in the brain of Aline. She completely forgot to warn me about an incoming disaster. The mother of Della was rolling back into the estate by the end of the week. Jaden shrugged it off, asking why a mom coming home was such a big deal. Clearly, he had no clue that the Duchess was basically pure, concentrated rage in human form. Fast forward to the present, and the second her carriage pulled up, the Duchess kicked down the door to the office of her husband. She immediately demanded an explanation. Why on earth was some random no-name commoner hired to tutor her precious daughter? Duke Duplain rubbed his temples, already looking painfully drained. He begged her to keep her voice down. She totally ignored his plea. Screaming that Della was their youngest baby, she refused to back down. The Duke sighed, admitting he was not exactly thrilled about the setup either. But what choice did they have? Every single elite high society tutor had eventually thrown their hands up and quit on the girl. They were literally out of options. Obviously, that excuse was not flying with the Duchess. She ripped into him, arguing that tossing a gritty mercenary at a noble heiress was deeply humiliating. The Duke tried to play peacekeeper. Top-tier magic instructors were insanely rare, and more importantly, Aline herself had vouched for my skills. She was having absolutely none of it. In her mind, dragging some street-level fighter into a noble classroom completely shattered their elite standards. Then she dropped her grand alternative. Why not just hire his brother Uncle Flam? Sure, he was slammed with work the last time they asked, but she figured his schedule had cleared up. The Duke just stared at her like she grew a second head. Was she seriously suggesting dragging the guy running an entire territory away from his massive responsibilities just to play babysitter? He quickly reminded her that Ebelstein was a powerhouse. You do not just leave a massive territory like that on autopilot. She doubled down. To her, social hierarchy was everything, and high society was a bloodbath. It was just as brutal as any actual war zone. A tutor is not just a walking textbook. They are supposed to mold a noble kid and prep them for the vicious aristocratic circles. If Della hit the social scene dragging a common mercenary behind her as a mentor, the entire family would become an absolute joke. Right on cue, Valerian slid into the room. He urged his mom to take a breather, reminding her she did not travel all this way just to spark a family war. She instantly bit his head off, snapping at him to stay in his lane. There was zero chance she was letting this disrespect slide. Suddenly, Reg stepped into the crossfire. He coolly pointed out that everyone was hyper-fixating on the wrong detail. My bloodline did not matter. The only thing that mattered was my actual skill level. Reg admitted that a street commoner teaching a highborn noble was definitely a weird flex. But if the guy had the firepower to back it up, who cared about his background? He offered a brutally simple solution. You want to know if the teacher is legit? Put the student to the test. But before he could finish his thought, the Duke cut him off. The Duke firmly stood his ground, swearing that my magic skills were the real deal. Reg shrugged it off, tossing out a new game plan. He wanted to throw Della into a live magic spar. If I was actually a top-tier mentor, she should have leveled up significantly by now. The Duke found himself cornered by that airtight logic. Smirking in satisfaction, Reg walked out his trap perfectly set. Valerian bolted after him, grabbing his shoulder. He demanded to know what twisted endgame Reg was playing by targeting their little sister. Reg froze, shooting his brother an icy glare. He challenged Valerian, asking if he seriously bought into this fake redemption arc after everything Della had pulled over the years. Valerian pushed back, insisting that her past mistakes did not erase the fact that she was family. They shared the same blood. They were brothers, they were supposed to have her back. The face of Reg went totally deadpan. To him, Della was not family anymore. She was a walking liability. Her unhinged behavior was going to drag the entire Duplain name through the mud. If she debuted in high society acting like a brat, it would trigger a massive scandal. Valerian was absolutely floored. He had zero clue his brother harbored that much resentment. Reg coldly turned his back. Walking away, he threw a final dagger. Della was the one who torched those bridges first. That was exactly why she was locked away in the annex to begin with. The very next morning, Della kicked my door open, waving the official sparring notice like a flag. Panting, she dropped the bomb on me. If she caught a loss in this fight, I was getting fired on the spot. I just looked at her completely unfazed. I told her I already knew the stakes, casually reminding her that Reg was a hardcore one-star mage. Her jaw hit the floor, then she exploded. She screamed, asking if I seriously had zero panic in my system when my entire job was literally on the chopping block. I did not even blink. I reminded her that I was a mercenary. My lifestyle was simple. Grab a quest, finish the gig, secure the bag, and vanish. I leaned back and flexed that I had already been paid a small fortune up front. That blunt reality check left her glitching in absolute silence. 1 week later, fight day was officially here. The private arena was completely decked out, packed with all the elite family VIPs hungry for a show. As the crowd rolled in, I strolled up to greet Duke Duplain. The guy looked totally baffled by my zero-stress energy. He just could not process it. He couldn't figure out if I was just completely fearless or insanely confident. But honestly, it only locked in his belief that I was an absolute VIP for the family. Meanwhile, Reg strutted into the arena. Bro didn't just want a simple W. He wanted to completely humiliate Della. In his twisted mind, she had to face the music for her past and regret it down to her very core. Cut to before the match, Della had straight up asked if I was just in it for the bag, completely uncaring about her future. I told her she was entirely missing the point. Her magic was leveling up insanely fast. Even if she couldn't bust out a one-star spell right this second, she was inching closer every single day. I had to remind her that the legendary blood of House Duplain was literally flowing through her veins. She hit me with a totally confused stare, wondering why I was suddenly hyping up her bloodline, so I looped back to a lesson I had already dropped. The School of the Wild is entirely built around finding yourself. But honestly, That philosophical answer just pissed her off. She snapped, demanding to know why I was spitting riddles right before the biggest fight of her life. Eventually, she took a breath, and for the first time ever, she dropped her guard. She confessed she was nowhere near the perfect student, but despite that, she desperately wanted to keep studying magic. More importantly, she wanted me as her mentor. Dead serious, she admitted she absolutely refused to train under anyone else. I just stared her down for a beat before finally breaking the silence. I straight up told her I was completely clueless about all the fancy etiquette and rules of noble magic duels. After all, I had never stepped foot in one before. But there was one thing I was an absolute master at. I knew how to survive and win. Then I hit her with one question. Was she actually ready to do whatever it takes to win? As that sank in, Della's mind flashed through the nightmare of losing. Being banished to the annex, getting shipped off to the monastery, and the crushing disappointment from her family. Suddenly this fight got intensely real. With pure fire in her eyes, she locked eyes with me and demanded I make sure she takes the win. Snapping back to reality, Della marched right into the arena. She wasn't just Reg's little sister anymore. She wasn't the spoiled youngest daughter of House Duplain either. She was standing tall as my personal student and as a fierce mage. Once both fighters locked in their stances, Dawn stepped up to the center and laid down the ground rules. The duel was strictly following the official playbook used by the elite mages of the Abelstein-Kelbry Salon. The first person to pop the protective magic circle of General Paloom would instantly take the L. With the rules out of the way, Dawn threw his hand down and officially kicked off the showdown. Now about that General Paloom circle. It's a stupidly expensive magical artifact. The enchantment auto-triggers like an emergency airbag the exact second the wearer is about to take lethal damage. Watching from the sidelines, I finally got a front row seat to how these stuck-up nobles actually fight. The clock was capped at exactly 10 minutes. But reading Reg's aggressive stance, bro had zero intention of letting it drag out. The literal microsecond the match started, he started rapidly chanting. His game plan was painfully obvious. He wanted to completely blitz Della before she could even twitch. A massive, blazing spell rocketed straight at her face, but Della instantly sidestepped and smoothly repositioned. Visibly ticked off, Reg clicked his tongue. He started spamming attacks. 1, 2, 3 blasts. But Della just kept weaving. Every single time he locked on, she was already sliding out of the strike zone before the magic could even detonate. From my spot in the crowd, I could clearly see her mana mastery had skyrocketed. But unfortunately, when it came to raw, actual combat instincts, she was still green as grass. One of Reg's brutal attacks finally pinned her in a corner. Panicking, Della threw up a desperate ice wall. That totally caught him off guard. She wasn't even casting an official star-ranked spell. Thinking her little shield was just a pathetic gimmick, he smirked, deciding to just obliterate it with raw, overwhelming firepower. He charged up an even deadlier blast, but right in that critical split second, Della remembered our brutal training sessions. I had drilled it into her head that street mercs don't fight like fancy nobles. I warned her that the elite crowd would definitely talk trash if she snagged a win using dirty underground tactics. But honestly, haters mean absolutely nothing if you're the one holding the trophy. I had asked her if she could swallow her pride and accept that. She had confidently said yes. Flashing back to the arena, Della completely ditched her own ice wall, sprinting away just before Reg's nuke shattered it to dust. I always taught her that underground fighters constantly secure wins even when they are hopelessly outclassed in power. The secret was simple. They weaponized literally everything around them. Meanwhile, Reg kept raining absolute hell on her from a distance. But Della never stopped moving. I hammered it into her brain that owning the battlefield is just as crucial as mastering your mana. Real fighters exploit the terrain, they milk every tiny advantage. Most importantly, they strike the exact microsecond the enemy gets sloppy. Another vicious spell plummeted toward her. She yanked up an ice shield and tanked the hit perfectly. But a sneaky second blast was already wrapping around from her blind spot. She completely missed it. Boom, a direct hit. A massive deafening shockwave completely engulfed the arena. The entire crowd gasped in horror. Della's mom instantly shrieked in panic, completely convinced her daughter was a goner. She was absolutely freaking out, screaming at Dawn to pull the plug on the match. But Duke Dupline Dude didn't even flinch. He flat out told her to take a seat because this brawl was far from finished. Her jaw practically hit the floor since everyone just saw Della tank a direct, brutal blast. But here was the catch. If Della had actually taken a fatal hit, General Palum's safety barrier would have instantly triggered, plus Dupline caught. Something super interesting during the chaos. While the whole crowd was gasping at the explosion, my eyes were glued to the arena. He knew I was 0% worried. I already knew exactly how much of an absolute beast Della had become. Back in the arena, Reg was starting to sweat. That protective barrier never showed up. Out of nowhere, a massive crack splintered across the floor. right under his boots. Bam, deadly ice spikes erupted from the ground and he barely dodged, getting skewered. That's when it clicked. Della was literally playing mole, launching surprise attacks from beneath the floorboards. In any normal tournament, dipping under the stage would mean instant disqualification. Reg shot a desperate look at Don, fully expecting him to blow the whistle, but Don stayed dead silent. The fight was still on and reality hit Reg like a truck. The crawlspace was technically still part of the battle zone. Before his brain could even process that loophole, another jagged ice spear ripped through the floor. He scrambled away, but the strikes just kept coming, rapid fire and absolutely ruthless. The worst part, he was fighting a ghost. Meanwhile, Della could just spam attacks all day, until she finally nailed him. For the first time, Reg saw the brutal truth. Della had completely thrown noble honor right out the window. Peering through the cracks, their eyes locked. Seeing her expression flipped a switch in his head. She was terrifyingly calm. He instantly knew this wasn't just her playbook. My fingerprints were all over this chaotic strategy. If she was going to play dirty, Reg decided to ditch the fancy rules too. He ripped off his heavy coat, finally getting dead serious. Up in the stands, their mom was absolutely losing it. Her precious daughter was scuttling under the floorboards like a feral goblin. She practically shrieked to cancel the match right then and there. But Duke Dupline shut her down. In his eyes, there was zero. The bloodbath would continue. Down in the dark, Della was flexing her insane radar for mana. She could literally trace the glowing magical currents in the air. Riding that advantage, she unleashed a blind barrage of strikes at Reg. Trapped on defense, there was no way he could chant his fancy, drawn-out spells anymore. He was too busy desperately hopping around to avoid getting impaled. Just as he was getting backed into a corner, he locked eyes on a massive support pillar in the center of the arena. Right at that split second, Della completely lost his magic signal. She instantly knew her bro was cooking up something sketchy, but she stayed cocky. The very next time he tried chanting, she planned to snipe him before he even finished. Up top, Reg had his own lightbulb moment. Della's magic radar couldn't track him perfectly through the thick wood. But honestly, he was basically a sitting duck up there too. He only had one hardcore option left. He needed to wreck the entire map. Skipping the chant, he blasted a raw burst of that center pillar. Crack. The massive column snapped like a twig and smashed onto the stage. Riding that shockwave, Reg shattered a huge chunk of the floor wide open. Then he leaped straight into the pit. If his sister wanted a grimy underground brawl, she was going to get one. Peering through the choking dust, he spotted her shadow and instantly fired a razor-sharp ice arrow. Della threw up a shield just in time, but the vibe was terrifyingly different now. The strikes were blindingly fast, wildly aggressive. For the absolute first time, cold panic gripped her chest. Reg finally figured it out. Up close and personal. He was the boss. One clean hit was all it would take to drop her. But too bad for him, Della wasn't about to play fair. Before he could blink, she charged forward and planted a brutal kick right into his chest. He slammed down onto one knee, gasping for air. As he scrambled to recover, Della grabbed a literal handful of dirt and hurled it straight into his eyeballs. It was instant agony, completely blinding him on the spot. Knowing he was stunned, she instantly bailed on the brawl and scurried back up to the surface. Reg wiped his eyes, suddenly realizing her desperate game plan. Her mana tank was running dangerously close to zero. That's exactly why she was pulling out every grimy, unhinged trick in the book. Even so, there was no way in hell he was losing to her. This whole intense showdown was literally set up to prove if Della even belonged here. He was ready to show her the massive gap in their power levels. A few seconds later, Reg dragged himself back out of the crater. The second Della saw him crawl out, a memory of my strict training flashed in her mind. I had told her to treat mana like glowing paint. Her spellcasting was the brush. To craft real magic, she had to scoop up the energy drifting around her and paint it into a perfect masterpiece. That mental picture was about to become reality. I remember how her jaw literally dropped when I first showed her how mana actually flowed. Now, staring down a massive defeat, she locked onto my advice. She closed her eyes and just felt the energy surrounding her. Raw mana swirled right at her fingertips. Channeling that exact vision in her head, she carefully started sculpting the energy. Seconds later, a wickedly sharp ice spear materialized out of thin air. The whole crowd instantly felt the vibe shift, and Dawn's jaw practically hit the floor. Even Della's mom was totally speechless. There was zero denying what Della was flexing right now. That was straight up one-star magic. Seeing Della charge her ultimate attack, Reg decided to stop playing games. He pulled together every single drop of mana he had, summoning this massive swarm of ice arrows. Even with Della leveling up mid-fight, dude was still super cocky. After all, he still had way more hours logged. Della hurled her spear with everything she had. In the exact same breath, Reg unleashed his brutal barrage. The two spells smashed into each other dead center of the arena, triggering an absolutely massive explosion. A crazy shockwave ripped through the stadium, leaving the crowd completely shook. Della's mom almost leaped right out of her VIP seat. For a hot minute, the whole arena was blinded by this thick dust cloud. But when the smoke finally cleared, a glowing protective barrier had triggered. Flashback to exactly 1 year ago. Dawn had just handed Duke Duplain an invite to some fancy high society party. Walking down the massive manor halls that day, the Duke had spotted Della sitting totally. She looked so isolated back then, practically invisible to the world. Snap back to the present, and that glowing emergency barrier, it was wrapped around Della. The second she saw it, reality hit her like a truck. She had taken the L. All that insane willpower she'd built up just instantly shattered. Tears started flooding down her face as all that pent-up frustration spilled out. Meanwhile, her mom was already popping off viciously, ripping into Duke Duplain. She threw a massive fit, calling the duel super trashy and pointless. She straight up blamed him for letting such an ugly street brawl happen in the first place. The Duke basically tuned her out. He was completely dialed in on Della because he had just caught on to something super crucial. Back in his prime, he was a hardcore knight who rode with his king into back-to-back war zones. And back in the day, the king once looked at him and said he had the crazy eyes of a man starving for power. Looking down at Della right now, he saw that exact same savage ambition staring right back at him. A bunch of maids sprinted over, panicking and asking if she was hurt. Della ignored them completely, just sobbing her eyes out. One maid tried to gently grab her arm to take her to the medics. Della aggressively slapped her hand away and just started walking. She stepped right off the arena floor. She walked straight past Reg, who gave this super awkward congratulation on a good fight. She didn't even look at him. The maids figured she was storming back to her room. Nope. She kept marching until she was standing dead in front of me, face totally soaked in tears. Shaking like a leaf, she choked out how insanely mad she was. Then, she actually apologized to me for losing. I stood up and just looked her in the eyes. I told her taking an L wasn't the end of the world. I said, "If you're this pissed off, weaponize it. Climb higher. Grind harder until you're untouchable." Those words literally broke the last tiny bit of armor she had left. She completely lost it and bawled even harder. The maids just awkwardly hovered in the background, having no clue how to handle the situation. A second later, the boss fight arrived, her mom. Without dropping a single word, she yanked Della into this super tight hug. Della opened her mouth to explain herself, but her mom gently shushed her. She whispered that the excuses could wait. Right now, she just needed a healer. After handing Della off to the medics, the woman whipped around and stomped straight toward me. That warm, loving mom energy evaporated into thin air. The second she got in my face, she absolutely went off. She called me absolute street trash. In her head, boosting Della to a 1-star mage didn't make me special at all. Zero hesitation, she slapped the living daylights out of me. She started screaming that I was basically teaching her noble daughter filthy, low-tier party tricks. Then she violently grabbed my collar, screeching that I had turned the Grand Duke's perfect little girl into an absolute embarrassment. Bam! A second slap echoed out. She kept cranking up the volume, spitting wild insults, and demanding I show some basic human decency. Before this, Karen could escalate things any further, Duke Duplain stepped onto the scene. Della's mom immediately spun around, totally expecting him to back her up. Plot twist. He stepped up and slapped her right across the face. He hit her with a cold glare, saying she was the one acting like literal trash. She completely froze, her brain short-circuiting. She couldn't fathom catching a strike over some random peasant. Duplain super calmly agreed that yeah, I was a commoner. But then he dropped the mic, reminding her that I was his daughter's master. He coldly asked what kind of garbage parent physically assaults their kid's teacher. Then he pivoted to me and actually asked me to let it slide, making some excuse about how every parent shows love in their own crazy way. I just took a heavy breath and told him we were cool. Duplain then told me to trail him up to the VIP audience room so we could have a private chat. As we walked off, Della's mom was left standing there, completely stunned, unable to process what just went down. Once we hit his private office, he totally gassed up my coaching skills with Della. He looked at me and promised a massive payout for my hard work. But then, he hit me with an offer I did not see coming. He literally just dropped a bomb asking if I wanted the ultimate cheat code for a commoner 3-star magic. Honestly, his bluntness caught me completely off guard. It was like he was reading my damn soul. As a 5-star mage and the nation's Grand Duke, his power was absolute, so obviously, I snatched that offer up in a heartbeat. Before handing over the prize, he gave me props for leveling Della up this far. But then he dropped the reality check, saying her current stats just were not going to cut it. If she wanted to survive the absolute shark tank of high society, I fired back, telling him that now that her potential was unlocked, practically anyone could take the wheel from here. I totally hyped up her momentum, convinced she would keep skyrocketing. But Dupain, he flat out vetoed that idea. He made it crystal clear Della did not need some random tutor, she needed a genuine mentor. His piercing gaze locked onto mine, and he claimed he could see right through me. He straight up clocked my hidden ambition, saying the fire driving me was way too massive to even say out loud. Crazy enough, he said he was letting it slide simply because it was me. I was totally shook that he was just casually giving me the green light to level up beyond my limits, maybe even shattering that 3-star ceiling. That exact moment hit me like a truck, revealing why this guy was so terrifying. He was not sweating my future power glow up at all. He was literally just pulling the strings and letting it happen. Dupain then confessed he knew I was not going to stay chained to this estate forever, completely recognizing my personal endgame. He asked if my bags were already packed mentally for when that day arrived. I hit him with a solid yes. The dude just nodded, promising he would not stand in my way. But he did ask for one favor, keep training Della just a bit longer. Then he looped right back around, throwing that insane offer on the table again. Did I want access to 3-star magic? The absolute peak tier allowed for a commoner. Obviously, we struck a deal and boom, the estate's VIP library was completely unlocked for me. Stepping inside, I laid my eyes on actual 3-star spell tomes. My jaw literally dropped, like there are mages who grind their entire miserable lives, just trying to scrape up a single 2-star manual, and here I was swimming in top-tier 3-star grimoires. In that surreal second, I realized staying at this estate was an absolute no-brainer. Although low-key I knew Pauline would absolutely lose her marbles if she ever caught wind of this flex. Later on, I bumped into Della. Homegirl immediately started flexing about finally hitting 1-star mage status. I instantly humbled her, pointing out she had only pulled off 1-star magic a single time. It still counts, she snapped, practically yelling, and asking if I could not at least pretend to be hyped about my student's massive glow-up. Since my nose was buried deep in my new OP spellbook, I totally ghosted the validation she was begging for. After a while, she caught the vibe and backed down. But hey, I did throw her a bone, and admitted she was leveling up. She had actually crushed it in record time. The whole thing threw me back to when she completely broke down, sobbing after losing our sparring match. Della instantly went on the defensive, trying to act all tough and claiming she was not crying, just that some random dust had hit her eyes. She did confess she was low-key terrified. I was getting fired, wishing her dad had just given her the spoiler warning earlier, that I was sticking around. Right then, I pivoted and told her it was time to grind the day's lesson. Since Della was speeding through her skill tree, it was finally time to unlock some fresh 1-star spells. Her eyes totally lit up at that. In her head, that was basically me declaring her a prodigy. I did admit her pacing was actually cracked, especially for a rookie who had just barely figured out mana manifestation. Della totally milked that compliment, smirking and bragging that she always absolutely delivers on every single promise she makes. Then she started rattling off her magical wish list with insane energy. Top of the list, Magic Arrow, since it is basically an instant cast with no chanting required. While she was busy mapping out her overpowered build, I just shut her down. I told her we were sticking to the basic mana manifestation grind. Della literally froze in her tracks. She totally thought we were speedrunning straight into the flashy 1-star tier. I broke it down for her, explaining a bunch of tactical reasons, but bottom line, fundamentals are everything. But right before I could go into full lecture mode, she actually agreed out of nowhere. She owned up to getting a bit too hyped, assuming we were just going to spam 1-star magic all day. Then she caught me just staring at her in disbelief. She raised an eyebrow, totally playing it off and teasing if she had something weird on her face. I hit her with a hard no, saying I was just mind-blown that she was actually following directions without a fight. Della instantly caught an attitude, crossing her arms and claiming she always respected my authority. I had to mercilessly remind her about the time she dumped filthy water on my head not once but twice. Her cocky smirk vanished instantly. She looked absolutely gagged that I still held on to that grudge, trying to stop the vibe from completely dying. She desperately pivoted awkwardly, suggesting we just jump back into the grind. We ended up sweating it out in training, until the sun went down. By dusk, Della's stamina gauge was totally empty. I called for a breather, and casually dropped that I heard her schedule was about to get super packed. She groaned and confirmed it. Starting next week, she was being dragged into boring etiquette classes, alongside her standard bougie noble education. I told her it was actually a massive win, since she had already bagged her 1-star magic rank. It was high time she leveled up her high society stats too. Della looked completely miserable. She started crying about every single subject they were forcing down her throat. Basic manners, foreign languages, history, geography, botany, piano, and freaking sewing. She literally asked out loud how Aline ever managed to survive that nightmare. Honestly, I was impressed too. That insane grind was exactly why Aline held the title of Dupain's elite flower, and practically ran the entire Evelstein social scene. Della whined that she only wanted to be a magic nerd. I shrugged it off, reminding her that Duke Dupain had personally handed me some serious boss-level authority so I could pull some strings. Della, though, was not buying it. I dared her, asking who could possibly block me. Without missing a beat, she dropped the ultimate final boss, her mom. According to Della, her dad might be cool with my vibe, but the Duchess, she was not the type to just let things slide without a fight. So I had to ask. Della broke down exactly why her mom was so dead set on getting rid of me. Basically, the matriarch was terrified of my influence. She was convinced that if I mentored her daughter, Della's high society reputation would completely tank. She genuinely feared Della would morph into some rough-around-the-edges mercenary. And honestly, Della straight up told me my teaching style had zero noble vibes. I just shrugged and told her it wasn't a big deal. While she stood there looking totally lost, I explained that shutting her mom down was actually a breeze. We just had to completely destroy her one excuse to complain. Meanwhile, the lady of the house was pacing the estate completely stressed out. Her mind was racing nonstop. The more she obsessed over Derek being a toxic influence on her kid, the more her wild imagination spiraled out of control. She started picturing Della rocking gold teeth, sprinting through the dirt, and hunting wild boars like an absolute savage. Just the thought alone gave her a massive migraine, and she racked her brain wondering what kind of insane deal Derek was offering Della to cause such a drastic change. Sure, she knew her husband had totally caved and accepted Derek's bribes, but she was still the boss of this estate and she held the power while she was plotting her next move. Boom! Della suddenly appeared right in front of her. At first, the mom expected the usual Della eagerly sprinting into her arms like a little kid, but the vibe was completely off. Della stepped up, dripping in flawless high society fashion, bowing with icy picture-perfect etiquette. She smoothly explained that she had been trapped in the annex earlier, recovering from her injuries, and dropped a painfully polite apology for missing their proper greeting. Then she casually threw in that she had a lot to catch up on. But oops, she was already booked solid for a morning piano lesson. Her mom literally froze, brain short-circuiting over how insanely classy her daughter sounded. Without missing a beat, Della coolly announced she had to dip because her academic schedule was totally packed. Desperate to make sense of this, her mom stammered out a question. Had she already started etiquette classes? Those weren't supposed to kick off until next week. Della gave a crisp nod, confirming she was already on the grind. That flex left her mom even more mind-blown, since officially those lessons hadn't even dropped yet. Wrapping up the chat like a total boss, Della excused herself and walked off. On her way out, she even dropped a sweet poised warning to a maid to take it easy. The whole room, mom included, just stood there in dead silence, totally shook, trying to process the insane glow-up they just witnessed. Meanwhile, over in the ultra-rich Ailstein district, Aileen was spilling the tea with her squad. Her friends brought up how totally stressed she looked at their last meetup, but noted she was radiating a totally different energy now. Aileen blinked slightly, taken aback, and quickly apologized, swearing she never meant to ruin the vibe. She confessed that her massive headaches were basically handled, leaving her totally zen. Her fiery red-headed bestie Alenta Belmire didn't hold back. She admitted she was super freaked out hearing Aileen had literally left the safe zone of the noble district, just to hunt down a tutor. Flashing a warm smile, Aileen thanked her for caring and spilled the real reason her little sister Della desperately needed a legit magic mentor. That was why she went totally rogue to personally scout the perfect match. Alenta was completely floored that Aileen would get her own hands dirty for this, guessing this mystery teacher must be an absolute legend. Denise Velteus, another girl in their circle, backed up the rumors, adding she'd also caught wind of Della's crazy situation. Eileen's eyes lit up as she revealed she'd just seen Della and literally could not recognize her own sister. She hyped up how insanely elegant and basically a whole new person. And the craziest part, she had actually unlocked one-star magic. Aileen admitted it was so inspiring it made her want to level up her own game. Denise was completely stunned that Aileen was name-dropping Della so casually, since their family usually treated her like a total secret. Denise quickly pieced it together: this insane character development had to be the work of that new magic coach. Aileen nodded hard, proudly stating that even without an ounce of noble blood, his skills were straight up broken. That's exactly why she trekked all the way out to the Belladon mercenary base, just to recruit him face to face. Hearing the word mercenary, Alenta's jaw dropped all over again. But honestly, the craziest part to her was how some random dude totally rebooted Della's whole personality, taking her from a total menace to a classy one-star mage. She instantly bugged Elaine for the tutor's name, figuring whoever pulled off this miracle was about to blow up and she just wanted to know who he was before he went mainstream. Boom. Plot twist, I casually dropped that I was the guy. Meanwhile, back at the manor, Della and her mom were having a little chat. Della casually flexed that I was teaching her manners since solo studying was basically impossible. Her mom, Dale, tried spinning it, acting super thrilled that Della was self-taught. Yeah, right. Della instantly shut that down. She clapped back, nope, it was 100% Derek. Dale pushed back, desperately fishing for what was so hard about reading a book. Della flat out told her it sucked until I stepped in. Honestly, Dale was absolutely crashing out internally at this point. My name was living rent-free in every single sentence Della dropped. With every Derek did this, Dale's urge to kick me out skyrocketed. She just needed one tiny excuse. Too bad she wasn't getting it. The entire staff was basically throwing a parade for Della, hyping up how chill and sweet she was acting. The gardener told Dale that Della's vibes were absolutely immaculate lately, completely flipping the script in just a few weeks. Then Dawn chimed in saying Della had straight up leveled up, so much that he accidentally mistook her for Elaine. He claimed she was officially hitting that true high society status. Dale was practically frothing at the mouth, not a single flaw to exploit. Later on, I was out grinding my magic training, totally hard stuck when Reg suddenly pulled up. He immediately apologized for crashing my session. I waved it off, asking what was on his mind. He claimed he wanted to talk about Della, but before he even got into the drama, his eyes locked onto the 3-star spellbook I was holding. I mentioned Dupain tossed it my way. That completely rocked his world. I admitted it was way above my pay grade, but pre-studying is always a power move. Something just clicked in Reg's expression right then. He muttered that his dad calling me a true mage finally made total sense. He didn't elaborate and just pivoted the convo. Back to Della. Dude was blushing out of his mind before he even formed a sentence. He mumbled that it was complicated, then awkwardly asked if I knew what teenage girls actually liked. His big idea, crafting her a handmade doll. My mind instantly flashed to that cursed doll Valerian made. I shut that idea down so fast. Reg gave a defeated nod, admitting he low-key knew it was a terrible idea. He stood up, rubbed his neck, and figured we should just head back in, since I was done grinding anyway. Walking back, he spilled that the mansion's entire aura had shifted. Valerian was hyper-fixated on ruling the territory. Dupain was staying quiet, but Reg swore the guy looked genuinely content. I told him Dupain had a crazy poker face. Reg explained his dad was finally stopping his avoidance act and accepting reality. People actually grow. Della had her glow up, and now he was ready for his own. He hit me with a super genuine thank you, then completely blindsided me. He pointed out that Della's magic felt totally different, like someone painting on a canvas. The second those words left his mouth, it hit me. Reg was the exact definition of a Dupain bloodline prodigy, an absolute genius. I explained that Della was tapping into the mana flow of the School of the Wild. He nodded, familiar with the lore. I broke it down for him. Everyone's dynamic with mana is completely unique. Now that Della found her perfect rhythm, she'd fly solo. My job here was basically done. If I stuck around trying to micromanage her, I'd just be an obstacle. Reg took a second to process that, then said he got it, adding that Della's main character moment was inevitable anyway. I couldn't argue with that. Fast forward 2 months, Della was getting her hair styled by a maid, picking out floral accessories. She held a flower up, loving the scent, and started chatting about how she was totally locked in with 1-star magic and was finally vibing with the staff. She realized how much she'd been missing out on, and gave me all the credit. The maid teased her, saying her happiness was literally radiating off her, asking if she was hyped for my magic class. Della looked genuinely shocked she was that easy to read. She asked the maid to save an extra flower to gift to me. But later that exact day, that same flower slipped right through her fingers. I broke the news. I was leaving. The tutorial was over, she had outgrown me. I told her that's just how the seasons work. Winter never lasts forever, but neither does spring. Afterward, I had a sit-down with Dupain. I dropped the fact that Della's magic belonged to the wild, something she instinctively knew. I warned him point blank. If he kept trying to control her path, he'd only ruin her potential. Dupain took it all in, fully understanding the reality check. My time at the mansion had officially expired. He took a heavy breath, got up, and stared out the window. He confessed that everything had shifted, that my presence actually let his daughter bloom. And finally, he admitted the harsh truth. He had been a terrible father. He confessed he was drowning in territory drama, but low-key looked relieved. Then, he straight up asked when I was packing my bags. I let him know I caught wind that Alan was dropping by the estate soon, so I was planning to hitch a ride back to Ibelstein with her. Once she bounced, Dupain hit me with that cold business tone, demanding the library key back. I nodded, promising to hand it over, along with the magic grimoires I was currently grinding through, and mentioned I would just drop the key. His voice immediately dropped a whole octave. No middleman needed. He wanted that key in his hand right then and there. Dismissed. I absorbed the cold shoulder, gave a formal bow, and stepped out, only to crash right into a very pissed-off Della. She was absolutely fuming. I gave a helpless shrug, telling her it is what it is. She already knew my mind was set, but her voice cracked anyway as she asked, could I just stay? Closing the gap between us, I reminded her I was a merc at heart. I belonged out there in the grit. Plus, I had my own magical grind to focus on. I hyped her up, saying once she leveled up her skills, she would hit Abelstein, and if my own stats had leveled up by then, I smirked, telling her I would gladly drop some fresh knowledge on her. She scoffed, calling me insanely annoying because I always pulled the exact right words out of thin air, leaving her completely speechless. I totally took that as a win. Later that night, though, Della got hit with a brutal nightmare. She jolted awake, screaming, absolutely soaked in cold sweat with her chest heaving. It took a hot minute for her spinning brain to realize it was just a bad dream. A panicked maid sprinted into the room to check on her. In that split second, a toxic urge crept in. She could throw a massive tantrum, slap the maid, and relapse right into her old spoiled brat era, serving up the perfect excuse for me to stay. She froze there in the dark, genuinely weighing the option. Then, she exhaled. She waved the maid off softly, saying everything was chill. The girl had done some serious soul-searching. Throwing a fit wouldn't make her special or valued anymore, she was past that. Departure morning hit. Alan had the ride prepped and waiting, giving me the nod to wrap up my goodbyes since we were rolling out soon. I spun around to find Della and her two brothers standing there for the send-off. Valerian stepped up looking bummed, asking if I seriously had to dip. I told him I had to get back to my roots. Reg stayed totally silent, but the quiet respect in his eyes showed he knew mansion life was definitely not my vibe. Valerian firmly told me to hit his line if I ever needed a favor, and he genuinely meant every word. Then I shifted my focus to Della. The girl was practically vibrating with stubbornness, refusing to speak. She held her ground as long as humanly possible, before finally caving under my unbroken stare. Dripping with pure tsundere attitude, she snapped, asking if I was delusional enough to think she would beg me to stay. She proudly claimed she was totally grown up now. I smiled, telling her teaching her had been an absolute honor, but I wasn't quite worthy of the master title just yet. I just asked her to lock in everything I taught her. She shot back that she was going to flex to the entire world that I was her mentor, basically nuking my chances of ever living a low-key life again. Because duh, I was the guy who trained the great Della Dupain. Catching herself slipping into her soft era, she immediately whipped her head away, muttering at me to stay safe and not pull any stupidly reckless stunts. I promised I would survive and threw it right back, telling her not to burn herself out either. She scoffed hard, flexing that she was an independent adult who could handle her own business. That hit me. I had dropped those exact same words on Katya back in the day. Katya had squeezed the life out of me during our goodbye, begging me to actually listen to her warnings. Standing right there with Della, the roles flipped and I finally felt the heavy weight of that emotion. I closed the distance and gave Della a gentle pat on the head. I softly told her there was zero rush to grow up so fast. That broke her. The tears instantly fell. As I finally turned my back, she shouted out a real, heartfelt goodbye. This time, her voice cracked as she said she really hoped we would cross paths again. I gave one last bow and told her I would absolutely love that. Fast forward to Ibelstein. I strolled right through the bustling market district and pushed open the tavern doors. Classic Pine was literally mid-brawl, pounding some dude into the floorboards. She froze the second we locked eyes. I flashed a grin and announced I was officially back. Jaden smoothly slid a crazy expensive bottle of wine across the bar. He smirked, calling it high society juice for a welcome-back gift. I gave him a nod of thanks. Pine completely scanned me up and down, roasting my pale skin and joking that living with the fancy Dupain family actually made me look like absolute garbage. She demanded all the tea on what went down. I brushed it off, saying it was nothing crazy. Just a basic grind. She rolled her eyes, accusing me of sounding like a stuck-up aristocrat now. Jaden instantly slid a drink her way to chill her out, telling her to take a breath. She snapped back, venting that she was beyond pissed because she had been solo grinding quests the entire time I was ghosting them. Jaden steered the chat, guessing I must have secured a massive bag from the nobles. He asked if the payout was actually worth it. I smirked, saying I scored something way better than cash, and slapped the heavy grimoire on the table. They stared blankly, just assuming it was a basic 2-star manual. I hit them with the correction 3-star. They completely lost their minds. Both of them started screaming, aggressively demanding to know whose vault I robbed, panicking that I was a dead man walking if the guards caught me. I casually dropped that Dupain handed it to me himself. Pine went dead silent for a split second, then violently grabbed me by the collar, desperately asking if that rich estate was hiring a bow instructor. Once the dust settled and Pauline crashed out like usual, I hit up Jaden looking for a gig. He gave me this wild look. I mean, I did just walk in and asked if I was for real. I told him I was locked in for some monster hunting. Low-tier bounties, whatever pays. Honestly, I felt like my skills were getting rusty. Jaden completely called my bluff on that. He basically said spellcasters are insanely rare in this gig, and if I wanted to grind, there were endless quests lined up. I told him I'd clock in tomorrow, and I wasn't capping. Pauline and I instantly clicked back into our zone. Sweeping through beast zones in perfect sync, no blind spots, zero wasted energy. We cleared out multiple zones, wiping out mobs on the go. Once night hit, I grinded to break through to Tier 3. Every single try ended with a massive blast, leaving my hands completely trashed and absolutely zero progress. Tier 2 magic easy, but breaking into Tier 3 was a whole different beast. From the summer heat straight through the freezing winter, Pauline and I were out in the wild grinding contracts, dropping monsters left and right. When we finally dragged ourselves back to the pub, Jaden just looked at us and sighed. He joked that it pays to be young, because only crazy kids would actually trek back and forth across the Kent Mountains. In a brutal blizzard like that, he swore we were the only lunatics unhinged enough to lug back a harpy skull. Through the freezing cold, Pauline just let out a long breath and whispered that she finally felt alive. Jaden ordered us to take tomorrow off. We totally deserved it. But then he dropped a new quest that was right up my alley. Super high payout, he noted. And stupidly easy. It was funneled through the roll mercs down on West Street directly from Count Belmard. They needed a regular peasant to help practice magic. Translation: some rich kid wanted a human punching bag. Jaden promised I just had to tank a few shots and grab the cash. I instantly took the deal. Cut to Alente. Her mentor just dropped the news that they hired some commoner for her combat practice. She was super weirded out by it. He hyped it up as essential training, claiming the guy was getting a massive payday so she could just unleash hell, trying to chill her out. He mentioned this peasant could tank Tier 1 magic. Alente clapped back that she was practically Tier 2, and the power spike between Tier 1 and 2, it wasn't just a level up, it was night and day. Then she actually met me. I gave a quick intro. The second my name dropped, her eyes shifted. Like it rang a bell, but she just couldn't pinpoint why. Her mentor ushered us into the combat ring. Alente eyed me up silently, doubting if someone this young was actually a spellcaster. Once inside, she questioned if I even knew the ground rules of a magical duel. I nodded. She ordered me to block with everything I had, promising a quick knockout, though secretly stressing about accidentally bodying me. I looked right at her and asked how hard she actually wanted me to push back. That question totally pissed her off. I explained I needed a power scale, so I wouldn't just be useless practice fodder. She froze, muttering that I had some serious nerve. Then she told me to go all out. I smirked and said I'd follow her exact orders. In her mind, a commoner hitting Tier 1 this early was a massive flex. But my cocky attitude was way out of line. This duel was basically her way of humbling me. A brutal reminder of the huge wall between royals and peasants. She opened with Shockwave, a solid Tier 1 blast. It's completely invisible. To dodge it, you have to read the mana spike the second it fires and perfectly calculate the hitbox. I deflected it instantly, warning her the next strike was already inbound. That sparked some serious rage in her. So the cocky kid actually had hands, cool. But pure skill doesn't bridge the class gap. She instantly swapped to ice arrows. Not those messy amateur shards either. These were crystal clear, razor sharp, and deadly accurate. Dozens of them spawned in midair, swarming around like a pack of wolves. Her strategy was dead simple. If I tried to juke them, she'd just spam area attacks to make dodging literally impossible. So I just flicked out a single mana bolt. It absolutely shredded every single one of her ice arrows in half. Before her brain could even process the wipe, my bolt slammed into the dirt, right between her boots. She totally froze, completely mind-blown. Some random peasant flexing that kind of micro-control. That was definitely not in her playbook. Her mentor clocked it too. My veteran mercenary title wasn't just some fake hype. 2 clashes in and Alente instantly knew she couldn't just casually style on me. She leaped back, created some heavy spacing, and started speed chanting an Elite Academy spell. Her whole vibe flipped to dead serious. The idea of a clean, precise knockout was completely scrapped. This time, she went straight for fire magic. She literally wanted to nuke the entire arena into ashes. I immediately caught the vibe shift. This was a whole different level of aggro. As her incantation wrapped, she slowly raised her right hand. And what spawned overhead wasn't just dozens of flames. It was literally hundreds of fire arrows. Dodging all that, yeah, mathematically impossible. I didn't even blink. I popped my full defenses and tanked that entire barrage straight to the face. Thank God I had already hit 2-star by then. Honestly, anything weaker and that single combo would have sent me straight to the grave. The smoke finally cleared. As my shield faded, I spotted it a sneaky tiny pulse of mana. Those fire arrows were pure bait. At point-blank range, dodging was complete, and throwing up another shield was impossible. This girl was an absolute prodigy. With barely a split second to react, I overcharged a 1-star light burst straight to the max. The blinding flash absolutely wiped out her vision. Totally blind, she had to rely purely on gut instinct to stay upright. She mentally forced herself to chill, listening for footsteps, tracking the rhythm, trying to regain control. But it was dead silent. Her sight booted back up right at the buzzer. Reading the leftover mana in the air, she somehow dodged my next shot. But I could tell she was hardcore struggling. She was finally realizing I had way too much actual combat experience. She started piecing it together. I wasn't even trying to hit her earlier. I was purposely forcing her to level up under pressure, and she was dead on. The second her eyes focused, I spammed 2 back-to-back arrows, panicking she had zero choice but to turtle up and block. Right as she charged up a counterattack, I completely blitzed her and closed the gap. But that was exactly what she wanted. Point-blank, rapid-fire casting was her absolute comfort zone. She locked in the absolute millisecond my hands sparked with mana she was going to blast me and secure the win. But my hands stayed completely empty. Instead, a massive lightning shockwave detonated straight from my boots. 1-star current manifestation. She barely blocked it by a literal hair. 1 millisecond slower, and she would have been totally cooked. Her instructor was watching silently from the sidelines, but mentally he had already made his call. A completely feral combat style, yet totally unpredictable. The kid is a monster. Alente started walking toward me. The fight wasn't officially wrapped yet, but then she stopped and gave me a super genuine bow. Straight up, she thanked me for an insane match. Suddenly, a spark flashed in her eyes as she tested out a new theory. I instantly redirected my mana, snatched her mid-cast lightning right out of the air and threw it back. Her jaw basically hit the floor. I literally just Uno reversed her own spell. She had never seen a flex like that in her life. She braced for the impact, knowing it was over. Then the bell went off. 10 minutes flat. Time's up. Official result. A tie. I casually canceled the attack I was holding, gave her a chill salute and told her good game like it was nothing. But we both knew who actually won. After that, her whole vibe completely flipped. She admitted I was a top-tier mage with absolutely cracked reflexes. She pointed out that for a guy who navigated high society politics so smoothly, I must have grinded insanely hard behind the scenes to get this far. I just shrugged and said surviving as a merc really doesn't give you the luxury of choice. She brushed off my modesty, saying she heavily respected the hustle. Then she gave me a quick heads up. Her grumpy old instructor wasn't exactly my biggest fan, so I should probably stop triggering him. She added that she leveled up a lot today and promised our next spar would go way differently. I told her with her raw talent, she's got nothing to stress over. Total scrubs weren't even worth her energy. The real final boss she was desperately trying to take down was someone else entirely. A specific face flashed in Alente's mind. Aislinn Eleanor Duplain, the one powerhouse she had never ever managed to beat, no matter how many times they clashed. She wrapped things up saying I could head out, and if they needed my services again, she'd just ping the Belden mercenary captain. But then she completely froze. The Belden mercenaries wait Derek. That exact name had popped up at the latest high society salon. Aislinn had literally name-dropped a merc with that same name. Alente's eyes blew up wide. Chucking her rich girl manners straight out the window, she lunged and grabbed my hand. Was I seriously the guy who taught Della 1-star magic? Long story short, I ended up trapped at her mansion until sundown. She kept it 100% real. She was ready to do whatever it physically took to finally crush Aislinn. Her goal was to hit 2-star before Aislinn did, and if that wasn't happening, she just wanted to win their next fight. Literally just once. I told her that was some heavy-duty competitive drive. She laughed bitterly, saying it might look like a normal rivalry now. But back in the day, she went way overboard. She used super toxic tactics. She totally regretted trash-talked Aislinn behind her back. And the fallout was actually insane. Aislinn just responded with pure empathy and comforted her. I stayed dead quiet. It definitely wasn't my place to butt in. After a massive awkward silence, she sighed and asked why she was even trauma dumping on me. She basically spilled her deepest insecurities just to prove she was dead serious, but she still needed answers. She looked me dead in the eye and asked the golden question. Since I'd been crashing with the Dupain family, I knew exactly what kind of monster Aislinn was, and Alente had just put all her own cards on the table. So what was the secret sauce to actually crushing her? Honestly, it was painfully obvious. I chewed on that for a second. I almost hit her with the standard pep talk, saying she just needed to keep grinding. But I swallowed the words. The girl staring me down wasn't looking for sugar-coated garbage. She was completely raw. She was literally handing her most vulnerable feelings to a guy she'd called a trashy mercenary like 5 minutes ago. Feeding her empty platitudes right now would be a massive slap in the face. So I locked eyes with her and dropped the cold, hard truth. She couldn't beat her. Zero chance. I watched her expression closely, fully ready to bounce forever if she threw a tantrum. Instead, she didn't even blink. She just said she didn't care she was getting that win no matter what. That's when it clicked. This wasn't the first time she'd been told she was second best. She immediately brought up my track record, pointing out how I leveled up the infamous Della into a one-star mage. In her mind, I was the ultimate cheat code to dethroning Iceline. I sighed and admitted it wasn't entirely hopeless. But I had two massive red flags she needed to accept first. Instantly, she fixed her posture, flipping back into full aristocratic mode. She smirked, saying we were finally speaking the same language. Rule number 1, did she have any clue how unhinged my training with Della actually was? I'm no fancy academy professor. I have zero patience, absolutely no lesson plans, and it gets brutal. Without missing a beat, she swore she could handle anything. Rule number 2, I'm a hired gun. Her vibe. Let the haters talk. She literally did not care if high society gossiped about the flawless Miss Alente taking magic lessons from a dirty mercenary. She was dialed in. Her endgame was legendary status across the entire empire. If she couldn't even bag the #1 spot in the local Elbest social scene, she'd consider it totally humiliating. She basically told me to stop testing her resolve with petty excuses. She knew exactly what was on the line, and winning meant way more than her ego. I absorbed her whole villain origin monologue like a standard quest briefing. Then I casually reminded her she needed to cough up a fat stack of cash. Like, hello, mercenaries don't do charity. She totally short-circuited, suddenly realizing my big dramatic second point was literally just about the money. Her face flushed absolute tomato red. She panicked, stammering that she'd pay whatever before awkwardly muttering about how hot it was in the room. It wasn't, but I kept my mouth shut. Cut to the next day's high society hangout where Iceline was spilling the tea to the rest of her clique. A major magic showdown was on the calendar, and she was planning to go all out. The girlies were totally shook that it was happening so fast. Alente rolled up, acting suspiciously polite. Iceline lit up, mentioning she was just talking about her, and the two wandered off for a private chat. Alente low-key flexed that she needed to prep since Iceline was basically undefeated and literally carried the title Flower of House Dupain. Iceline flashed a sweet smile, shooting back that she couldn't slack off since she was going head-to-head with her favorite redhead. Smirking, Alente name-dropped that she bagged a new private tutor and was feeling dangerously confident. Iceline was genuinely surprised she'd vibe with someone that fast. Alente quickly flipped the script, claiming it wasn't about trusting the guy, it was about trusting Iceline's stamp of approval on him. And then she dropped the bomb, her new mentor was me. That definitely caught Iceline off guard, which was exactly the bitter reaction Alente wanted. She wanted her salty. But instead of getting defensive, Iceline just beamed with genuine warmth, saying I was totally reliable. Alente glitched for a second, stuttering out a confused thanks. That was so not the vibe check she practiced in the mirror. Iceline just stood there lost in thought, remembering some heavy lore Della had shared earlier. Meanwhile, Alente was secretly patting herself on the back, absolutely convinced Iceline was seething with jealousy that I belonged to her now. She was literally doing a victory lap in her own head. But the second Iceline opened her mouth, looking like she was about to drop a truth bomb, Alente instantly panicked and interrupted. She blurted out that she couldn't be late for our first session and basically sprinted away before Iceline could ruin her fantasy. Iceline just quietly watched her dash off, crossing her fingers that this whole messy situation wouldn't end in a total disaster. From the shadows, a white-haired girl took notes, whispering to herself that these two were definitely doing the most. Cut to Belden's hideout. I shoved all the high school drama out of my brain and locked in on the grind. The tavern owner took one look at my mountain of open tickets from House Bellarm and groaned about me being overworked. I shrugged it off, reminding him that at least I didn't have to commute all the way out to the Earl's turf anymore. As long as I could clear these quests right here in Ebelstein, a job was a job. He scoffed, saying I made it sound like a walk in the park before cutting straight to the juicy stuff. Did our girl actually have a shot at dropping Iceline in the tournament? I stopped what I was doing, admitting it wasn't I still had one crazy ace up my sleeve, assuming Alente. If she smashed through that 2-star bottleneck before the showdown, she could totally flex her rank advantage and steamroll her opponent in a head-to-head clash, and lock in an easy W. But the captain told me to ditch the wishful thinking, and asked for a game plan grounded in actual reality. I grinned, telling him that was exactly why we were talking, and that I desperately needed him running damage control to keep us from crashing. Oh, and I needed Pauline too. He just gave me this deadpan stare, flat out saying I was cooking up something totally unhinged and borderline suicidal. I shrugged. Honestly, playing it safe was never an option with this crazy operation. Right on cue, Pauline practically kicked the door off its hinges, screaming at the top of her lungs that the whole thing was a massive death trap. She ranted that those guys were absolute con artists. That they had completely finessed her, dragged her through hell, and milked her for every last penny. The captain and I just sat there awkwardly letting her vent her entire villain origin story. Flashback to the night I pulled up to the Belmont estate. I looked Alente dead in the eye and told her Phase 1 was brutal live combat, 10 back-to-back rounds. Only after surviving that would we actually dive into the nitty-gritty of her spellcraft. I needed to see her raw, unfiltered combat skills before anything else. She smirked, saying that hardcore vibe screamed mercenary, and that even my teaching style was absolutely savage. I told her less talking, more fighting. We immediately threw hands, grinding straight through until the sun dipped down. By twilight, the courtyard was totally wrecked, looking like a literal war zone. Alente was hunched over, desperately sucking in air, running on absolutely zero fumes. I gave her a quick nod, good hustle, take a 10-minute breather. Then we hit the heavy magic theory. Her head snapped up, staring at me like I was insane. 10 minutes. She practically cried that her mana pool was completely dry. I coldly shot back that if she dug deep enough, she could totally scrape the bottom of the barrel. Then I ripped into her form. Her spell structures were sloppy. I demanded she lock in, focus up, and manifest 10 more ice spears. She agonizingly squeezed the magic out. I didn't even blink. You are still 5 short. Next, I demanded 100 mana arrows. She croaked out that she was literally empty before her legs gave out and she face-planted right into the dirt. Only then did I drop the drill sergeant act. I praised her grind, cleared her for dinner, and casually asked if she was still breathing. I threw out a lifeline telling her that if she was already breaking, walking away was that sparked something. She instantly bolted upright, glaring daggers as she asked if after putting her through absolute hell, I really had the audacity to suggest she tap out. She scoffed, saying my dramatic warnings had her bracing for absolute torture. But this was just a heavy gym session. She sneered that I clearly knew nothing about the toxic, cutthroat survival games of high society. I just smirked, guess I did misjudge her grit. She proudly declared she was only mildly winded from attending a stuffy gala earlier, but starting tomorrow, she promised to unleash her true potential, daring me to crank the intensity up to demon mode. She even flexed, claiming my little warm-up barely made her break a sweat. I caught the word tomorrow and hit the brakes. What do you mean tomorrow? She just blinked, totally lost. I reminded her of my exact words, this was just a dinner break. She stared at me awkwardly, chuckling that my sense of humor was sick and twisted. I kept my face stone cold. I didn't take this paycheck to play games. Cut to the blazing afternoon sun. I was ruthlessly driving Alente way past her breaking point. 5 more arrows. I yelled that she was nowhere near her cap, pointing out the faint mana still sparking around her fingers. I instantly doubled it to 10. I offered an ultimatum, cast the spells or do a brutal set of sprints. She picked the cardio. Moments later, her legs literally turned to jelly and she crashed onto a stone bench, violently heaving for air. I leaned over to check her vitals, but she just looked up with a crazy grin. She whispered that she was actually embracing the grind. Every time I gave her an out, she shot it down instantly. Quitting just wasn't in her DNA, but that stubbornness bought her 0 breaks. I immediately dragged her back to the sparring ring. Fast forward through 2 brutal weeks under the freezing winter sun. Alente was practically a zombie melted onto a stone table, completely cooked. She begged Denise to shake her awake when Iceland finally pulled up weakly, confessing that this endless hell camp had utterly destroyed her. Denise softly nodded, gently asking why she was putting herself through this torture. Alente's answer was ice cold. Winning was the only option, period. Denise murmured some sweet support just as Iceline strolled into view. Alente violently jolted awake, full panic mode, terrified of getting caught looking so busted. From the other side of the courtyard, Iceline just chillingly invited the rest of the crew to go check out some hyped new clothing boutique. Alente aggressively ducked her head, sweating bullets until Denise gave the all clear. The embarrassment was suffocating, even though Iceline had briefly stopped near the exit. Clearly spotting the massive bags under Alente's eyes, she didn't say a single word. Later that night in her room, a maid dropped off a ridiculously fancy chest sent straight from House Duplain. A care package from Iceline dropped an ultra-rare mana potion. The maid didn't even finish her sentence before Alente's face completely iced over. "Trash it," she snapped. The maid froze up. Alente doubled down, her voice venomous. I said, "Toss it. Every single drop." Pivoting straight back to her grind, she demanded my whereabouts. I'd been up since dawn plotting our next move. Right next to me sat a letter from Iceline's turf. Super sweet, sending good vibes for the winter. To Alente, pure passive-aggressive trash. She stormed out to the courtyard where I was chilling, skipped the basic pleasantries, and demanded a brutally honest reality check on her stats. I just stared her down for a beat. "Honestly, you should just quit," I deadpanned. That absolutely set her off. She fired back, totally unhinged. I gave her a half-baked apology but stood my ground. Shaking with rage, she spit out that catching a win was her only option. She literally begged me for the cheat code to crush Iceline. She didn't put me on the payroll to hear it was a lost cause. She paid me to carry her to victory. If you're not going to help, get out. I didn't flinch. I just asked her what her backup plan was when she inevitably took the loss. I hit her with facts. Hyper-fixating on winning was actually hard-nerfing her potential, and sometimes you gotta take the loss to actually level up. Her eyes welled up. And then the dam just broke. She trauma-dumped everything, the toxic rumors she'd been leaking about Iceline, the deep-seated grudge she'd been feeding for years. She owned up to being completely petty and insanely jealous. And right in the middle of her breakdown, she finally hit the core truth she'd been dodging this whole time. She literally had zero valid reason to hate the girl. That toxic energy was never even about Iceline. It was 100% friendly fire. Her voice completely shattered as she dropped the words, self-loathing. The desperate need to win was never about beating her rival. It was just a massive cope to escape her own inferiority complex. She needed me to see her raw dedication, even if it meant exposing her most toxic, unfiltered self. Heavy silence hung in the air. I stepped up, totally locked in. We're going to win. That was my final answer. Her eyes shot up, she gave one hard nod and matched my step. Fast forward a few days. A super flashy carriage pulled up to Count Belmont's massive estate. Alente's old mentor hopped out. Scanning the VIP drop zone, a red-haired dude strolled up with insane swagger, gave him the official welcome, and casually dropped that the trek to Averstein seemed pretty smooth. The royal acknowledged the massive commute had to be draining, and offered him a seat. The noble mentioned it had been a hot minute since he checked in on Alente, asking for the latest tea on her progress. The mentor covered for her, claiming she was making solid gains, and had been seriously sweating it out in her magic training. The noble was instantly hyped. He boosted her up, claiming her raw talent was totally unmatched, and swore it was only a matter of time before she totally eclipsed him. The mentor just nodded, keeping his poker face flawless, because if the timeline leaked that a literal nobody commoner was carrying Alente's training, the fallout would absolutely wreck them both. The noble then casually name-dropped that he had some side quests to wrap up in Averstein too. The mentor played it cool, assuring him Alente would be hyped to see him. Meanwhile, way out in the Badlands of Averstein loomed a massive gate, the drop zone for the nameless labyrinth. Pauline's spidey senses were tingling. She questioned if dragging someone as squishy as Alente into a literal death trap was actually a big brain move. Jaden just shrugged it off coolly, stating I'd already run the calculations on this raid. Alente stood there, looking totally gagged. As the horrific reality sank in, she was the one jumping into the pit. She panicked, demanding to know the game plan. Am I supposed to just 1v1 monsters in there? I hit her with a reality check. This was literally the lowest level tutorial dungeon in the zone. Her mission buff, her survival instincts through raw, unscripted combat. The squad and I would be spectating. No permadeath allowed. She gaped at me, convinced I was totally trolling. I flexed a massive wave of aura and laid it out cold. The boss fight was days away, our clock was ticking, and this was the fastest way to power level. Then I pushed through the gates. She dragged her feet behind me, looking like a total clown who just realized she played herself. The four of us dropped into the raid together. Dead silence instantly choked the air. Trembling, she asked what was lurking in the dark. I barked at her to keep her head on a swivel. Even a trash-tier dungeon will wipe your HP if you space out for 1 second. Shockingly, that did zero to calm her anxiety. Pauline pinged the first threat, a massive goblin aggro train rushing our spot. Alente let out a screech. Then Jaden locked onto a massive shadow in the gloom. Something built like an absolute tank. I shot Jaden a look. Could he solo it? He flashed a cocky grin. Depends on the payout, boss. I flared up my mana again, snapping that we'd negotiate his paycheck after we didn't get slaughtered. A dozen glowing, bloodthirsty eyes snapped right to our squad. Alente froze solid, completely paralyzed by the reality check of live combat. The goblin mob rushed us. I tanked the front line, taking the aggro head-on. Behind me, Alente was practically choking on her own fear, unable to form words. I barked at Pauline to run interference, and dived straight into the mob. Pauline went off from long range, her snipes deleting threats from every angle. I blitzed through the swarm in a blur of steel and fire, carving a flawless path through the chaos. The three of us operated like an absolute machine. Alente was just a deer in headlights in the center of the crossfire, until she felt a gargantuan presence behind her. She whipped around. Jaden had already intercepted the beast, casually doing the math out loud on the monster's bounty drop. The mutant goblin threw a heavy haymaker. Jaden sidestepped it and flawlessly sliced its arm clean off in a single frame. Alente just watched the whole execution unfold. Her entire cool girl facade completely shattered. like she was actually about to get wiped out right here. The sheer chaos around her was totally short-circuiting her brain. I whipped around and snapped at her, "Goblin 12 o'clock. Wake up." The ugly thing was already rushing her. Her mind just went totally blank. It was full-on sleep paralysis. Her body completely locked up. Pure panic had completely hijacked her system. Then, ice cold and crystal clear, she had to take this freak down herself. In that split second, a switch flipped deep inside her core. With that monster sprinting right at her face, her pathetic past flashed before her eyes. The sheer delusion she used to live in. All that big talk with zero follow-through. The toxic jealousy, the petty trash-talking behind people's backs. For the first time ever, she got a brutal reality check of who she really was. But right in the heart of that blinding fear, her resolve turned to literal steel. This exact make-or-break moment was why she signed up. She manifested an absolute unit of an ice arrow. Freezing blue energy erupted around her in high def. The goblin launched itself for a vicious strike. The icy spike blasted forward and absolutely shredded the beast. One shot, flawless execution. The rest of the squad went dead silent. Up until now, she had been pretty much dead weight. She had looked completely useless before. But now, she just soloed a monster. She just stood there in the aftermath, shaking like a leaf, and slowly locked eyes with me. I just hit her with a deadpan. "This is literally just the warm-up." A soft, knowing smirk crept onto her face. Chilling under the massive stone walls of Evelstein, I was rereading the exact same letter. It was from the absolute legend herself, Cardia Flameheart. She mentioned it had been over 2 years since she ditched Evelstein and felt super bad about ghosting me for so long. She was currently tutoring the young heiress of House Oster, and had been completely swamped. Apparently the girl was super hyped about learning magic. But even with that crazy grind, she spilled some major nostalgia about her days back in Evelstein. She claimed those brutal grinding days actually gave her a super rare taste of freedom. She straight up dropped that out of every single mage she had ever crossed paths with. My talent was totally unmatched. She was dying to know what tier I was sitting at now and hyped me up, saying that the next time we crossed paths, I better flex my insane progress. The letter wrapped up, casually signed off by my former mentor. I had been obsessively reading it over and over. For the past 14 days straight, Alante totally caught on. She started asking questions, so I just casually dropped that it was from my master. She snarked that my teacher must have had the patience of a saint to actually deal with a menace like me. I didn't even skip a beat, fully agreeing that she was a legend. Alante just kind of froze, and awkwardly confessed she was just trying to troll me. I stared at her deadpan, asking what part of that was even supposed to be offensive. She had zero comeback for that, and just let it slide. I reminded her that the big showdown was dropping in exactly 48 hours and asked about her headspace. She paused, letting the reality sink in for a sec, then locked in with this hardcore gaze and flat out declared she was taking home the win. Cut to the Noble District's magic arena. The place was absolutely packed to the brim. The second we rolled up, the hype in the air was literally suffocating. Iselin caught me on her radar from across the mob, ditched her entourage, and shouted my name. She came at me with this super sweet vibe, dropping that she heard the rumors about me acting as Alante's personal coach. I brushed it off, claiming our whole link-up was just pure luck. She giggled, saying I hadn't changed my stubborn vibe at all, and asked if I was grinding Alante into the dirt. Apparently Della spilled the tea that my teaching style was low-key unhinged, and that Alante was looking totally burned out. I shot back that pitying the competition is usually just a massive flex of your own ego. She looked slightly thrown off, asking for context. I just gave her an icy warning to never sleep on anyone, no matter their status. All around the stands, the snobby elites were already gossiping. The general consensus was that Iselin would completely wipe the floor with her, unless Alante randomly pulled some 2-star magic out of thin air. A few side-eyes noticed that Alante looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. Then Iselin confidently strutted onto the battlefield. The crowd went absolutely feral. Her flawless main character energy literally commanded the attention of every single person in the arena. Just across the dirt, Alante marched forward, every single footstep completely unfazed. A single mantra looped in her brain like a broken record: she was going to dominate. Her eyes were laser-focused. I hung back, watching my student march straight into the lion's den. Iselin flashed a ridiculously polite smile, hoping Alante was doing okay. Alante mirrored the fake nice energy right back, and threw in that Iselin's ice-cold composure was definitely top tier. Iselin gently dodged the compliment, confessing she had literally never been this stressed before a throwdown. Alante hit her with a tiny smirk and told her to bring it on. Instantly, both girls started revving up their mana. An insane aura of blue energy exploded around Iselin, while chaotic orange flames violently erupted around Alante. Alante blitzed first, She unleashed an absolute barrage of flaming rockets into the sky, until the entire arena ceiling was painted with blazing arrows before raining them down like a catastrophic meteor shower. While pushing the offensive, my voice echoed in the back of her skull. She had asked me the ultimate question: how could she possibly clutch a win? If this battle came down to pure magical stats, I had straight up told her she would get completely destroyed. My actual win condition was way more brutal. Pure raw willpower. I had pushed her through an absolute gauntlet to break past every single limit and burn through absolutely every drop of mana in her veins. When she had sarcastically joked that this sounded like some twisted psycho hobby of mine, I completely shut it down and dropped the cold hard logic. The second both of their mana tanks hit zero, this brawl wouldn't be about fancy magic tricks anymore. It would be an absolute battle of guts. It would be about endurance. Strategy was to make her magic as overwhelming and relentless as possible, force the duel into a war of attrition. The one who could draw out even a fraction more mana at the end would win. She had asked what happened if Iselin's reserves were far greater. I told her she would lose. Then I reminded her of her bloodline and told her to trust herself. Back in the arena, the crowd watched in stunned silence. Even Iselin's own supporters couldn't help wondering if Alente had always been this strong. Alente raised her arm and intensified the barrage. Flames rained across the arena without pause. Iselin didn't falter. She expanded her blue mana outward into a wide defensive and held it steady under the falling fire. Her expression sharpened. She focused completely, resolved that she would be the one to walk away from this. The fire arrows struck the barrier one after another. The force built until a massive explosion shook the field. Alente's mana reserves had grown enormously. Even so, Iselin's barrier held glowing steady through the smoke. She assessed calmly. Alente's firepower was overwhelming but unrestrained, burning through mana at a pace that wouldn't last. Through the smoke, she sensed movement and tracked Alente. Repositioning under cover, she formed an ice arrow and fired with precision, seemingly catching her, only for the figure to dissolve into an illusion. That single moment of surprise was all Alente needed. She appeared behind Iselin, a massive ice spear already formed and ready. At that range, Iselin barely sensed it in time. No opportunity to raise a barrier. A memory surfaced me explaining the plan. Overwhelm with flames, melee with illusion close in for the decisive strike. Alente executed it exactly. Iselin made her decision in an instant. She gathered every remaining trace of mana into a single concentrated sphere, and released it the moment the spear struck. The explosion threw her backward. The spear missed and tore into the ground, instead shattering it on impact. She landed, steadied herself, and stood firm. Alente froze at the speed of that recovery. She recalculated. Her opponent was far more skilled than she had accounted for. She shifted approach entirely. No incantation, pure will. She summoned countless ice spears straight from the ground, blanketing the field in sharp spikes. As she advanced without stopping, the crowd went silent again. Generating magic at that scale through willpower alone was something else. I watched from the sidelines and said nothing. Alente had taken the bait exactly as I expected. Iselin prepared her counter. She had seen the growth, she had adjusted. So had I. Alente had already set the trap before any of it began. A concealed flame arrow had been waiting silently in the sky. At exactly the right moment it came down, and destroyed Iselin's entire formation of ice spears in seconds. Iselin looked up in shock. She realized the attack had been planned for She went still for a moment. Alente lowered her hand with a faint smirk. The momentum had shifted. But Iselin felt something she hadn't felt in a while. She couldn't predict the next move. Even the crowd had noticed both fighters were now evenly matched. Doubt crept in. She couldn't win under the current conditions. She took a breath and chose to reset entirely. Her expression sharpened. The hesitation left her face. I noticed the shift, the instant it happened. Iselin raised her hand. Blue mana began gathering around her, growing denser with every passing second. The pressure built until it stopped feeling like magic. It started feeling like something heavier. The mana in the surrounding air bending toward her, falling silent, submitting. Every trace of ambient mana in the arena disappeared. Mana alignment, a rare state where a mage surpasses their limits and forces all surrounding mana into submission. I had heard of it, I had never seen it this close. Then the fireball formed above the battlefield. It expanded rapidly, distorting the air around it, radiating heat and pressure that pressed against everything in the arena. Alente stared up at it and couldn't move. The sheer size, Iselin poured everything she had into it, pushing well beyond her limits. A 2-star fire spell brought into existence through will alone. A memory surfaced in Alente's mind. A training session that had left her flat on the ground. I had walked over quietly and handed her a water pouch. She had pushed herself up, taken it, and after a moment, admitted she wasn't sure she could beat Iselin just weeks into training. I remember looking at her totally confused and straight up telling her she'd take the dub. Well, kinda. She just stared back, way too exhausted to even question it. That memory snapped the second the crowd absolutely lost their minds. Wait, was that actually a 2-star spell? Alente's jaw practically hit the floor. This was definitely not in the script. She shot me a panicked look, but I just stayed dead silent. You could see the tears welling up as sheer panic and frustration took over. Then the massive fireball rushed her. She completely froze for a split second, gasping for air as she looked up. The blazing sphere was right on top of her, crashing down hard. Her brain went into overdrive. A basic shield wasn't going to do zero against a 2-star attack. Ice spears wouldn't even dent it. The doubt hit her like a truck, screaming that she was cooked, that beating Iselin was a total pipe dream. But then pure survival instinct kicked in. She blasted mana straight ahead, using the intense recoil to launch herself backward. Iselin looked genuinely shocked by the big brain play. A heartbeat later, the fireball slammed into the dirt and a massive explosion completely swallowed the arena. The brutal shockwave clipped Alente mid-dodge, blasting her violently backward. She totally lost her balance. Slammed into the ground and tumbled across the dirt, barely escaping the worst of it. Thick smoke choked the air, and right in the dead center stood Iselin, gasping for breath. Just dropping that one attack had absolutely bankrupted her mana pool. And honestly, that's exactly what I was waiting for. Spamming a 2-star spell before you've actually mastered it is basically just unleashing a beast that eats your own energy. Alente's hand was physically shaking as she balled it into a fist. Watching her closely, I could literally see a switch flip inside her. Iselin was always crazy talented, but right now, she was pushing way past her limits and leaving it all on the battlefield. This was her ultimate flex of respect. Anyone going that hard definitely deserved the exact same energy back. A tiny smirk crept onto Alente's face as the math started mathing. If she could just hold out a little longer, the win was hers. But Iselin threw her hand up again. Crackling blue mana flared into scorching heat as she charged up another spell. Seconds later, another giant 2-star fireball was floating above her palm. With a vicious swing, she sent it flying. The entire crowd gasped. This one was way faster than the last. The flaming spear ripped through the air at a terrifying speed and locked straight onto Alente. She reacted instantly, pivoting to dodge, but Iselin tweaked the spell mid-flight. With just a flick of her wrist, the fireball curved sharply, acting like a literal heat-seeking missile tracking its target. At the absolute last second, Alente made her play. She dropped super low, slapping both hands against the floor. Boom! She detonated a burst of mana right under her feet and launched herself skyward. She rocketed up, until her shadow totally vanished into the glaring sun. Iselin desperately tried to track her, but the blinding light made it impossible. Hidden in the blinding rays, Alente let out a confident smirk. She raised her hand instantly, summoning jagged ice spears, one right after the other. The glowing weapons hovered around her like a halo. She knew that if Iselin even tried to pop a shield, it would completely drain the tiny bit of juice she had left. Down below, Iselin was literally shaking, fighting to stay on her feet. She threw up a desperate spell. A thin layer of ice materialized just in time to block the strike. But as Alente touched down, she frowned. That wasn't a real shield, it was just a flimsy chunk of ice. And right then it clicked. Controlling those homing fireballs had totally drained Iselin. She looked terrible, her face completely ghost white. Watching from the stands, I knew this fight was wrapping up. Alente stood tall and took a confident step forward. Her swagger was fully back. A smug little grin flashed across her face, totally convinced she had Iselin backed into a corner. There was zero chance Iselin had enough gas in the tank to keep fighting. Alente figured she still had enough energy to spam magic arrows or ice spears at least 2 more times. She was absolutely certain that would secure the bag. But then a sickening crack echoed across the arena. Alente's eyes bugged out. A hidden fireball violently ripped through the shattered ice. The sheer force of it literally blew her backward. Iselin had dumped every single drop of her remaining energy into this one final nuke. The flaming sphere rushed right at Alente's face. But at the absolute last second, it completely swerved off course. Dead silence fell over the entire stadium. Alente dropped her guard and stared. Iselin was just lying out cold on the dirt. Her body was twitching uncontrollably. She had pushed way past her absolute limits, desperately trying to scrape together just a drop more mana. Alente crept closer, and for the very first time there was a brand new look in her eyes. Pure fear. Back in Aberstein, the rich nobles always flexed harder and shined brighter than anyone else. And Iselin was the golden child at the center of it all. She got all the hype, all the praise, and was basically treated like royalty. But for Alente, that intense spotlight just cast a giant suffocating shadow. She had been stuck living underneath it for her entire life. While Iselin literally grew up swimming in privilege and endless adoration, Alant swallowed the toxic whispers and endless mockery. People literally treated her like a joke, just sitting back and waiting for her downfall. Those brutal memories left permanent scars on her soul, but she refused to quit. Hidden in the shadows, she kept grinding, turning her pain into a weapon. She clung to one single, desperate hope that one day she would absolutely crush her haters and prove she belonged. Snapping back to reality, the arena stood dead quiet. Iselin was totally wiped out, collapsed on her knees with her mana tank practically hitting zero. Her fingertips were literally shaking. Yet her vibe remained completely unbothered, even covered in dirt and totally exposed in front of the entire stadium. She radiated this unbreakable, quiet grace. That raw confidence totally scrambled Alant's brain. It was like Iselin literally had zero secrets, and absolutely nothing to protect. She just left her entire soul out there on the battlefield without a second thought. Down in the stands, the crowd absolutely lost their minds, screaming for Iselin to get up and fight back. Meanwhile, Alant stepped up and raised her hand for the final blow. For a split second, her eyes locked onto mine, flashing back to all those brutal training sessions. She absolutely knew the victory was hers. But right on the edge of the win, something dark and heavy clawed at her chest. A suffocating dread swallowed her whole. She was terrified that no matter how this match ended, she would still be stuck in that exact same miserable place. Across the dirt, Iselin pushed her broken body to move. Out of nowhere, Alant broke the silence. Her words dropped like an absolute bombshell, totally catching Iselin off guard. Alant slowly dropped her hand. With a totally straight face, she lied and said she was completely out of mana. Iselin's brain totally short-circuited as she stared blankly. She genuinely could not process what just dropped. Alant just flashed a bittersweet smile and kept talking. She hyped up Iselin's insane power and smoothly admitted she still couldn't beat her. Before Iselin could even blink, Alant pressed a hand to her chest. She respectfully bowed her head and threw the match. A split second later, the stadium absolutely exploded into chaos. The crowd went totally wild celebrating Iselin's win, but Iselin was literally glitching out, still glued to the dirt. She was absolutely shell-shocked. Even with the deafening screams echoing around her, the whole thing felt like a total fever dream. Her squad immediately swarmed her. They totally hyped her up, aggressively interrogating her about that insane magic combo she just pulled off. She just gave them this awkward, shy smile, still totally drowning in the moment. Her eyes eventually wandered across the chaotic arena. Alant was already ghosting the scene, walking off totally alone. Over in the corner, I was casually chilling with a book. When I saw her heading my way, I quietly snapped it shut and gave her my full attention. Alant broke the ice first. She asked if I caught that whole dramatic show. She flashed this goofy grin, joking about how massively she just trolled the entire stadium. She totally obsessed over how hilarious Iselin's face looked the second she threw the match. Just thinking about it made her giggle, but mid-laugh, heavy tears started pooling in her eyes. She frantically scrubbed them away, desperately trying to keep that fake smile glued on. She swore that even after taking the L, she actually felt totally fine. She practically begged to know what I thought of her fight. Sure, the ending was super messy, but she desperately needed validation that she crushed it. I let the silence hang for a second. Instead of answering, I just locked eyes with her. Piece by piece, her whole tough girl act crumbled. The fake smile shattered. The tears flooded down. Without even realizing why, she absolutely lost it, sobbing totally out of control as her walls fully caved in. She dragged herself over to an empty corner and slumped down. Super frustrated, she angrily mumbled that she wasn't some little kid. I kept it real and told her there was literally zero things to criticize about that battle. Her insane grind was crystal clear for the whole world to witness. Alant froze, but the heavy tears kept slipping through her shaking fingers. Finally, she spilled the raw truth. More than literally anything, she craved that win. But at the final second, an invisible wall slammed her down. She confessed that even if she took the crown, nothing inside her reality would actually shift. She was totally convinced she would just be dragged right back down, to the bottom where she started. I didn't interrupt her, just stood there and absorbed her pain. After a heavy pause, a super faint, bitter little smirk tugged at her lips as she joked that, when it came to major imposter syndrome, she was miles ahead of Iselin. Derek kept his voice super low, admitting he honestly wasn't much different from her. That totally caught her off guard. Then he dropped this insanely deep truth bomb. He told her that even if she looked totally pathetic, crying right now, it literally didn't matter. Alant stared up at him, her glassy eyes wide open. Meeting her totally broken gaze, Derek dropped the facts. If she constantly let the fear of looking weak control her, she would literally never level up. Hitting her right in the feels, she buried her face in her hands again, totally overwhelmed by everything. Her racing mind drifted with old memories washing over her like ocean waves. She visualized Iselin standing miles ahead, totally untouched by the suffocating darkness that had always stalked Elant. But this time the vibe completely shifted. For the absolute first time, she no longer felt completely trapped in her own shadows. Watching this entire drama unfold from afar, Denise soaked it all in, before casually spinning around to face Iselin. Walking up with this super soft smile, she totally hyped up Iselin's legendary performance in the arena. She let out a slow breath. "This totally feels off," she muttered, claiming the W just didn't feel earned. Denise just dropped, her eyes flashing a subtle, knowing smile instead of spilling the tea. Aislin's expression instantly hardened. "It's not just about raw talent anymore," Aislinn vented. She knew deep down that Elante had totally blown past her level. The stuff that actually counted, Elante had it on lock. Her insanely fast level-ups were straight-up proof of that. Mid-rant, Derek's face randomly flashed in her brain. She flinched immediately, shoving the thought into the mental trash bin. Snapping back to reality, she hit her maid with a strict order: draft a letter to the main estate right now. Looking back up, her eyes burned with pure, unfiltered drive. Meanwhile, cutting over to the Dupline mansion, the Duke was laser-focused on a scroll. Dressed Wolfdale, a legit 6-star mage, had just randomly dropped into Ebelstein. His oldest son broke it down. Nobody knew why Drest was making moves, but the whole customs deal getting pushed up way early. Yeah, that was definitely a reaction to the Grandmaster's flex. The Duke leaned back, letting the gears turn in his head. He remembered how super weird it was for the Belmiard count to pop up in Ebelstein. Boom. The dots connected. This entire chaotic mess pointed straight back to Drest. A top-tier oracle doesn't just wander around for the vibes. The guy always had a master plan. "Also, we got mail from Aislinn," his son chimed in. She was straight up demanding a new magic tutor. The Duke barely blinked. "Just send one of our in-house guys," he shrugged. But his son sighed. "It's way messier than that." She specifically name-dropped Derek. And to make things worse, Derek was currently crashing at the Belmiard turf, heavily tutoring Lady Alent. Given the awkward politics, the son pitched sending their head butler to smooth things over. The Duke instantly shut that idea down. "Hard pass," he said. He was already packing his bags for Ebelstein to deal with the whole dress drama anyway. He'd handle the tutor situation personally. Flash forward to golden hour. We catch Derek and Elante chilling over some tea. Swirling her cup, Elante dropped the news that she was hitting pause on the hardcore studying. After that intense emotional roller coaster, the girl desperately needed a mental detox. She totally knew Derek was going to bounce back to grinding missions for the Beldun Mercs. Derek gave a firm nod, but right then the vibe in the room shifted. Elante leaned in close, smoothly sliding her foot over his under the table. A dangerously cheeky smirk painted her lips. "If I slide into your requests for a VIP session, you'll come running, right?" she purred. She wanted him locked in as her personal magic coach. The bold move actually caught Derek slipping for a split second. Snapping his cool back into place, he promised he'd be there. But rubbing his neck, he confessed he was pretty much out of tricks to teach her. Elante giggled, totally roasting him for acting so out of character and humble. She shifted her gaze outside. The frozen landscape was melting. Winter was officially logging off. Fast forward to nightfall. Derek strolled into his hideout, instantly getting hyped up by his 2 loyal goons. He flashed a chill, knowing smile. Meanwhile, cutting to a dark carriage, the Count of Belmiard was speeding off into the unknown. Back at the mansion, Elante was dead to the world until her maid started absolutely hammering on the bedroom door. Groaning, she smothered her head with a pillow. "Bro, I told you I'm on PTO today. Cancel the classes," she whined. The maid totally panicked. This hits different, my lady. You really need to see this." Grumbling, Elante dragged herself out of the sheets and yanked the handle. But the second the door swung open, error 404, brain frozen. Her dad was literally standing right there, staring at her like she hung the moon. Fully shook, Elante aggressively slam-dunked the door right in his face. Her brain was glitching hard. Why the heck was her dad here? Cracking the door back open, she plastered on the most painfully awkward smile. "Hey, Dad. What brings you to my neck of the woods?" she squeaked, begging for a quick sec to swap her pajamas for actual clothes. A quick wardrobe change later, the two were sipping tea. Her dad casually brought up her insane boss fight against the Dupline girl. He knew that chick was no joke. Elante nodded, totally agreeing that the matchup was a massive learning curve. Then the Count pivoted straight to Derek. He started doing the math. If a random street merc had god-tier coaching skills, maybe it was time to lock him down. Like slap a Belmiard VIP contract on him and keep him totally exclusive. Elante cringed, warning him that the crusty old nobles would definitely throw a fit over that. Her dad just let out a dark, booming laugh. "Baby girl, I'd literally burn the world down for you," he promised, his eyes dead serious. Just let Daddy handle the haters. Cut to Derek and his crew casually farming goblins out in the wild. It was a total breeze, right? Until a goblin ambushed him from the blind spot. Derek instantly flared his mana, but the second it sparked, something felt wildly off. 3-star mana. This energy was way too massive for him to safely control. Going purely on survival instincts, he unleashed a fireball. But this wasn't just a spell. A colossal shockwave of pure fire blasted from his palms, detonating into an uncontrollable, earth-shaking explosion that ripped through the entire zone. Fast forward, the squad dragged themselves back to the shop. Hearing the crazy story, their uncle absolutely lost it, terrified that Derek had almost nuked himself. His blonde sidekick, yeah, she was handing out 0 passes. She ruthlessly roasted him for dropping a 3-star nuke on low-level mobs. The overwhelming rush threw Derek straight back to the exact moment. He first unlocked 2-star mana. Right then, a completely unknown voice cut through the tension from behind. A cloaked old guy strolled out super chill. No need to stress just because you've hit a plateau, kid. He dropped some deep lore explaining that the School of the Wild is all about syncing with nature's rhythm, not forcing a massive level up. But honestly, he totally knew that kind of Zen advice never sticks with hotheads like Derek. What seriously tripped Derek out was that this dude radiated absolute 0 mana, like dead silence. Yet his gut screamed at him that this guy was an absolute legend. Standing right there was the pioneer, the undisputed goat of 6-star search mages. The old man tossed back his hood, revealing himself as the one and only wandering spirit, dressed wolftail. Flashing an easygoing smile, he just casually asked if they stocked any decent booze, claiming the road had totally wiped him out. Meanwhile, night had totally swallowed up Della's massive estate. Way past midnight, Della was still grinding solo. A glowing wave of mana pulsed across the dirt, breathing like a living force field. Sweating bullets, she locked in, trying to rip that raw energy upward. The mission was simple. She wanted to manifest ice spears, straight out of thin air. But brutal reality check, every single try just fizzled out into nothing. Spamming the spell over and over, she got 0 results, completely burning through her stamina. Della totally collapsed in the dirt, throwing her head back in furious frustration. "I honestly thought you grew up a bit," a voice mocked. Her brother smirked. But nope, still the same angry brat. Even through the roasting, he had to admit that pulling off 5 ice spears at once was a massive flex. Guess that's the perk of actually scoring a god-tier teacher. Della instantly snapped back, denying it. He casually dropped the bomb that Azaline was about to recruit that exact same arrogant guy as her tutor. Boom. Della instantly fired up, totally horrified, and aggressively vetoing the idea. She was legitimately stressing that Azaline would suffer through the exact same nightmare training. She survived. Her brother told her to chill out and stop spreading messy rumors about me. He spilled some tea he caught at a fancy party recently. Apparently, Lady Alante was also desperate to keep me on her payroll. Della puffed out her cheeks, totally speechless for a second, secretly racking her brain trying to figure out how this guy was getting so much hype despite his attitude. Her brother hit her with straight facts. I grabbed a total disaster like her, and completely rebranded her into an actual elite. Duh, of course, high society was watching. She screamed at him, threatening him for daring to call her a brat. But then she dropped her gaze, mumbling low-key. She admitted that yeah, she was totally a menace back then. His smug grin came right back. He pointed out it might actually be a massive win for her if I signed Azaline, because then Della would get a solid excuse to hang out with me again. Trailing off, he muttered that my clout was basically going viral way faster than anyone predicted. He genuinely hoped the line of nobles fighting over my schedule wouldn't get any longer. Cut back to me at the Beldun Tavern while dressed Wolftail calmly slammed his drink. I was completely mind-blown. Why would an absolute powerhouse, like the literal dressed Wolftail, a top-tier magic god, choose to chill in a shady dive bar like this? Suddenly he called me out by name, and asked if I was actually Derek. I snapped to attention, replying with total respect. But inside, I was absolutely freaking out that this legend even knew I existed. He politely asked if we could take things offline, just like that. We were wandering the dead silent streets under the stars. Walking side by side, he dropped a bombshell. My powers felt bizarrely weird, completely defying logic. He straight up told me my raw talent was already off the charts, so his advice would totally blow my mind. Then he hit me with the deep questions. Why the endless grind? What was my end goal? I kept it real and confessed I wasn't chasing some epic destiny. I was just low-key obsessed with pushing my limits and seeing how ridiculously OP I could get. That answer sparked his interest big time. Flashing a smirk, he dropped a reality check. For a nobody commoner trying to shatter the glass ceiling, my foundation was still pretty trash. Like seriously lacking. But despite that, he actually offered to take my brain totally short-circuited. Like, do you guys realize who Dressed Wolftail actually is? The dude is an absolute legend, a born commoner who cracked the insane 6-star mage tier. After settling down with a family, he kept leveling up, smashing right through the 3-star barrier. He literally became the GOAT for everyday people. His hometown transformed into the ultimate hub for underdog magic users trying to glow up. But the exact year he hit the 4-star milestone, Dressed pulled up to his house, only to find his entire family butchered. That bloodbath totally cut to the villains. Some snobby count was just chilling with his butler, casually asking if Dressed had finally stopped crying about it. The butler smugly reported that the broken mage had already scuttled into hiding. He added that all his loudmouth commoner fanboys had scurried back into the shadows. The count practically spat out a laugh. He mocked how pathetically fragile peasants were whining about why trashes even bothered playing with magic. Then he dropped a cold threat. If Dressed ever dared to show his face again, it would be game over. But plot twist. Dressed personally crashed that little chat. In one blinding flash of steel, he sent the butler's head rolling. The noble panicked and scrambled to run, but Dressed completely deleted his legs, leaving him face-planting onto the marble. The count squealed for his life, but Dressed gave 0 drops of mercy. Fueled by pure, unhinged rage, he executed the guy on the spot. From that day on, Dressed went rogue. He spent 30 years as the most wanted fugitive, dodging both the royals and the elites. While on the run, he just kept grinding. He completely broke the power scaling, hitting the god-tier rank of a true 6-star mage. Suddenly, the imperial family realized they had majorly messed up. If they kept poking this walking nuke, their whole kingdom would get wiped off the map. So in the ultimate backtrack, they officially announced that his revenge arc was totally legal. Just to save their own skins, they literally handed him a noble title. Dressed flexed his way into the aristocracy using nothing but raw, terrifying magic, cutting back to the present. I was shook. A literal god of magic was offering me private lessons. There was exactly 0 chance I was turning that down. Meanwhile, the camera pans to the ultra-rich district of Ebelstein. Inside the VIP boardroom of Cleon Hall, the heavy hitters were plotting. Grand Duke Dupline, Grand Duke Veltez Deloff, and Count Belmord were locked in a highly toxic political debate. Veltez gave Dupline a super passive-aggressive warning. If he wanted to push up north toward the Belkos Peninsula, he better watch his back around those brutal White Zone dungeons. Veltez even fake smiled and offered his own knights as a backup squad. But Dupline instantly clapped back. He sneered, asking if Veltez's so-called elite knights were just overhyped trash-tier mercenaries. Veltez just smirked, hitting a nerve by pointing out how hard it must be to run a massive territory with a pathetic private army. He casually suggested that giving up the land was totally an option. That jab had Dupline fuming. Feeling the room about to explode, Count Belmore dropped a nervous laugh and tried to kill the tension. He scrambled to change the subject, suggesting they just wrap up the boring politics and go check on their kids. That reminded Dupline of some juicy gossip. He heard Belmord's daughter Alant actually threw down with Azaline and held her own. The Count puffed out his chest. He bragged that even though Alant took an L, her latent potential was finally exploding. He heavily coped, swearing that with a top-tier coach, she would definitely leave Lady Azaline in the dust. Right on cue, Dupline name-dropped me. He ruthlessly pointed out that if Alant wouldn't stand a ghost of a chance. That completely bruised the Count's ego. He defensively argued that I was already super tight with Alant, so that would never happen. Dupline just brutally shut him down. He seriously doubted I would base massive decisions purely on who I bumped fists with. Meanwhile, Grand Duke Veltez was quietly losing his mind, trying to figure out my real identity. Not wasting a single second, he deployed Denise to personally dig up my dirt. Cut to the local tavern a bit later. The Count swaggered through the doors, completely scared. The noble leaned in, flat out asking if he was the big boss running the Merc squad. Without missing a beat, he crashed into a chair and loudly ordered a round of booze. He complained that his butler had totally ghosted him, leaving him 0 choice but to handle this mess himself. The captain dropped the bomb that I had been missing in action for days, straight up rejecting every single gig. Hearing this, the Count started stressing over whether a rival faction had already snatched me up. Out in the Ebelstein suburbs, chilling at the Veltez estate, the white-haired girl lounged back. She casually juggled an apple in one hand and gripped a sealed letter in the other. She glanced at her maid, asking when the mail dropped. First thing this morning, the maid chimed back. Tearing it open, Veltez gave crystal-clear orders: track down a guy named Derek immediately and lock him in as her personal trainer. She figured her dad was rushing this solely because my market value had totally crashed, making it an absolute steal to recruit me now. But honestly, the timing could not have been more toxic. Today was practically a sacred holiday for her. It was the exact drop date she had been hyping up for months. Her absolute favorite author Riley just dropped a brand new, highly anticipated novel. The wild title. The lady submits to the cold Grand Duke's ice greatsword. Still duty called. If she left her dad on red right now, he would absolutely nag her to death for the next 3 weeks straight. Swallowing her bitter disappointment, Denise barked at Bella to prep her fit as soon as possible. Eyes blazing with sheer focus, she declared she was hitting the streets to hunt somebody down. As the night sky pitched black, the scene shifts to me buried deep inside an isolated cave alongside dressed Wolftail. The freezing stone walls bounced our quiet breaths back and forth as we sat cross-legged grinding through our silent training session. He broke down the technique. I needed to literally feel my mana mapping out the entire cave, brushing against every single rock before snapping back to my core. Trusting his vibe, I slowly unleashed my aura. Vivid emerald energy erupted around my body, surging outward through the dark cavern like a massive tidal wave. Dress then dropped some heavy lore explaining that this intense exercise was the absolute baseline for all search-type magic. At 1 star, it was just a basic radar for dodging threats. Hit 2 stars and it becomes a crazy tracking device. Reach 3 stars, and the power spikes enough to completely shred through cloaking spells and fake identities. Level up to 4 stars and you gain literal X-ray vision into people's souls. But 5 stars, that is where it gets wild. Unlocking the sick ability to read minds and literally chat with ghosts. Then there is the legendary 6 stars. The god-tier power to predict the future. My jaw physically dropped, foreseeing reality before it happened. Insane. Catching my absolute shock, Drest kept a straight face and casually confessed he had already witnessed the future himself. Actually, that was the entire reason he hunted me down in the first place. He flat out admitted I was the key to surviving the coming storm, which instantly gave me major anxiety. Desperate to know my fate, I pressed him. Drest dropped a name. Valerian, the big shot heir to House Duplain. He warned me that before I even hit adulthood, Valerian was destined to plunge deep into the dark, twisted arts of necromancy. To dodge that cursed timeline, Drest looked me dead in the eye and stated I had to assassinate Valerian before any of that chaos could start. That heavy reveal just spawned a million more questions in my head, but Drest totally shut down the conversation right there. He warned that messing with destiny was no joke. Knowing too many spoilers would easily trigger a butterfly effect, making tomorrow dangerously unstable and violently unpredictable. Still, he decided to throw one last devastating spoiler my way. Based on his vision, I was literally fated to die. Drest braced for me to panic but looked shocked when I stayed totally cool. I quickly fired back, pointing out his exact words. He said I was fated to kick the bucket, not that my death was a guaranteed game over. My sheer confidence actually forced a smirk out of the old master. Smiling softly, he confessed that he really did not want to see me bite the dust either. According to him, I had to survive, and if survival required strength, then he would personally make sure I gained it. To survive what was coming, I would need to become overwhelmingly powerful. As he raised his hand, mana gathered within his palm. Then it exploded outward. A terrifying surge of energy shot into the sky, forming a massive glowing halo around the moon. At that moment, I finally understood one thing. As I watched the overwhelming display of power, I quietly reflected on the words of Dressed Wolftail. The scene shifted to a bright and lively morning in the city. A luxurious carriage rolled to a stop, and Denise stepped out. Her beauty immediately drew the attention of nearby pedestrians. She instructed the carriage driver to stay behind and rest while she continued on foot. As Denise walked beside her maid Bella, she noticed the constant stares directed her way. Naturally, she assumed it was because she was beautiful. Bella, however, looked completely unimpressed. She bluntly reminded Denise that her room was always a disaster, that she rarely bothered to wash properly, and that she usually spent her days buried under blankets while reading books. Bella admitted that the normal appearance of Denise was already shocking enough, but somehow she looked even worse today. She praised Bella for having such a great sense of humor. Bella immediately clarified that she was not joking, not even a little. She then urged Denise to hurry, warning that another noble house might recruit me first. Denise remained unconcerned even as she took her time. She believed she was still ahead of everyone else. Denise recalled hearing that I had rejected every offer and disappeared without a trace. She reasoned that I was not the type of person who disliked money. If I had abandoned mercenary work, then something more valuable must have appeared. Someone capable of handling magic at my level and age would only walk away from paid work if they had discovered something extraordinary. Denise considered 2 possibilities. Either I had found a powerful grimoire or encountered an exceptional teacher. However, another detail caught her attention. I had willingly left the Dupain mansion, one of the best places imaginable for magical training. Since there was hardly a better environment for a young mage, that could only mean I had found something even greater. Before she could think any further, Bella announced that they had arrived. The two entered the office of the mercenary guild leader. The moment the guild leader saw Denise in person, he looked completely stunned. He explained that even noble young ladies were now searching for me. Unfortunately, he still had no idea where I was. 3 different groups had already visited earlier that morning asking the same question. Denise calmly asked whether Dressed Wolftail had visited the guild recently. The guild leader was visibly startled. Satisfied with the information, Denise thanked him. She immediately decided to investigate the carriage transit records. The scene then shifted to the Coachman Guild in the commercial district of Ebelstein. There, Denise and Bella carefully searched through official travel records. Bella eventually asked how Denise had known that Dressed had visited the guild. Denise explained that the answer had been obvious. I had willingly left the mansion of a 5-star mage despite being completely obsessed with magic. That meant only the arrival of a 6-star mage could have drawn my attention away. Since Denise already knew a 6-star mage was arriving in Ebelstein, she had simply connected the pieces. According to her, the old mage had walked directly into her trap. Feeling proud of herself, Denise wondered whether she might secretly be a genius. Bella immediately shut down that idea. She pointed out that Denise almost never used her brain in the first place. As usual, Denise somehow interpreted the insult as praise. With exaggerated exhaustion, Denise dramatically complained about how difficult life was for someone as talented as herself. She even claimed she wished she could become incompetent. Bella wondered whether Denise genuinely enjoyed hearing her maid talk back to her. She casually remarked that Bella only ever noticed her beautiful side. Still, she raised an important concern. Even if they managed to find me first, recruiting me would not be easy. Powerful families like Dupain and Belmer were already competing for the same goal. According to her, recruiting me would be the easiest part because she already had the perfect plan. When Bella asked what kind of plan she was talking about, Denise confidently revealed her strategy, a honey trap. Bella looked even more disgusted after hearing that. She reminded Denise that their biggest rival was Lady Alini. Denise immediately argued that she was obviously prettier and desperately sought the approval of Bella. At that moment, Bella finally discovered an important record. A week earlier, a boy wearing a robe and carrying a travel pass had traveled toward the outskirts of Rammel Hill and the Laspa Great Cave. The scene then shifted to the Laspa Great Cave itself, where I continued my intense training under the guidance of Dressed Wolftail during the session. Derek suddenly sensed unfamiliar presences approaching. He calmly informed me that members of House Velthus had arrived and appeared to be looking for me. Meanwhile, Denise and Bella carefully ventured deeper into the cave. As they moved forward, Bella repeatedly begged Denise not to continue. Instead, she suggested returning to report everything to the Patriarch, coming back later with soldiers. Denise immediately rejected the idea. If soldiers became involved, she would lose the chance to claim the achievement herself. Even worse, mobilizing troops could attract the attention of rival houses and give someone else the opportunity to steal the credit. Suddenly, Bella froze. In a panic, she pointed toward the darkness ahead. 2 enormous, glowing red eyes were staring directly at them. Denise quickly stepped in front of Bella and prepared for battle. Although the cave was supposed to have been fully cleared, she admitted to herself that offensive magic wasn't her strongest area. Unfortunately, running away now wasn't an option. Then the truth emerged from the darkness. The terrifying red eyes didn't belong to a monster, they belonged to me. I calmly welcomed Lady Denise to such a humble place. The moment she saw me, she froze in shock. At last, the mysterious mercenary she had been searching for stood right before her. Then a confident smile slowly spread across her face. The time had finally come to make me hers. Unfortunately for her, I was still trying to figure out why she had nearly blasted me with a spell 5 seconds earlier. I told her the conversation had been pleasantly calm. Denise froze. Bella, standing nearby, looked like she was trying very hard not to smile. She failed. Denise recovered quickly. She softened her voice. She said she had admired me for a long time, that she had imagined this meeting countless times, that learning from me would bring her true happiness. It was quite the speech. I stared at her and asked why she was suddenly talking like she was performing in a stage play. The cave echoed, "Well, sure, but that was no reason for the dramatics." That finished it, Bella erupted. Denise turned to look at her. With the expression of someone who had just watched their masterpiece fall off a wall, she shifted tactics. She brought up the duel between Lady Eileen and Lady Ellen, said the strength of the Roshi trio made her feel left behind. Afraid of stagnating while everyone else grew stronger, she stepped closer. Closer still. Close enough that I could tell she expected my heart to be doing something dramatic. It was not. I pushed her back and put distance between us. I told her I did not find her claims convincing. From everything I had observed, she showed little genuine interest in magic. I reminded her of the earlier incident. The moment she mistook me for a monster and launched an ice spear in my direction. The spell was a disaster. I told her that despite her impressive natural reserves, her magical foundation was a proof that she had never taken training seriously. Derek, to his credit, kept his face perfectly still. I told her not to talk about sincerity while standing in front of someone with hidden motives. To anyone who genuinely cared about magic, that kind of performance was an insult. Then I turned and walked away without looking back. I told her I did not know what she actually wanted from me, but I was certain it had nothing to do with magic. Then I was gone. That night, outside the cave tents, surrounded a campfire. Denise sat beside the flames in silence. Bella eventually asked if she would be all right. She would not be giving up. If she did, another noble house would reach me first. Bella warned her not to push too far before turning to leave. Denise stopped her. She asked Bella to retrieve the 4th volume of Duke's Pillar of Fire Melts, The Commoner Lady, by the following day. Bella stood completely still. The next day, I was sitting alone when Denise arrived. She was carrying a box so large it was almost carrying her stuffed with books. Magical crystals, snacks, and training materials stacked in every direction. I looked at it, then at her, then back at it. She caught her breath and explained that even if she could not contribute much herself, she wanted to support my training however she could. I told her it would not change my answer. She smiled anyway and said that watching me train made her feel stronger, which was a strange thing to say, but she seemed to mean it. What she did not say out loud was the actual plan. I looked over the supplies, found the snacks, and started eating. Then I mentioned between bites that accepting the gifts still did not make me her teacher. She came back the next day and the day after that. Magical crystals, another every time. I accepted it. Every time I said the same thing. Denise had returned to camp. Looking at the nearby pillar cracked and partially collapsed, I will admit, the mana reserve I mentioned was not exaggerated. Before the dust settled, Bella came running with worse news. The head butler of House Duplain was approaching. With Denise and Bella hidden, the procession that entered camp was, by any reasonable measure, excessive for a simple visit. Watching from cover, Denise apparently wondered aloud whether someone had declared war. The butler approached me with full composure. House Dupain was formally requesting that I serve as Lady Eileen's personal magic instructor. I accepted without hesitation and told him it was an honor. Denise heard every word. The butler turned to me after hearing everything and asked if I was prepared to leave with them immediately. I declined. I would consider the offer seriously, but only after completing my current training. He tried a different angle, better compensation. It did not work either. I apologized and explained my position. Plainly, at my current level, I would not be able to help Lady Eileen the way she deserved. Teaching magic while holding anything back was something I was not willing to do. The butler accepted this with grace. The moment, lady. Eileen learned my location had been found when she heard the head butler had gone out the previous evening without informing her. She expressed regret. She had wanted to go herself. She stood up, ordered preparations for departure, and requested the fastest soldiers available. Her maid raised a concern about the terrain being difficult and the journey rough, welcoming her instructor. It was a duty she could not hand to someone else. That night the camp was quiet. The fire burned low. Denise sat beside it. After a long silence, she said she was leaving in the morning. Bella agreed, then added something about how quickly she seemed to be giving up. Denise looked at her and asked whether Bella privately thought she was a fool. Bella denied it quickly. Denise looked down and admitted something, that her stubbornness had always gotten her what she wanted until now. This time she felt no desire to keep pushing. Bella told her that I wasn't someone who responded to status or money, that I seemed to be after something else entirely. That apparently sent Denise back to the conversation with the butler. My refusal, the part where I said I wasn't capable enough yet to help Lady Eileen properly. She turned it over in her mind, and for the first time recognized there had been no pride in it, just honesty. I was deep in the cave when she found me. The stones around me were still rising slowly, telekinetic energy spreading evenly through the space. When I heard footsteps, I opened my eyes slightly. Denise stopped a few steps away and asked whether she could sit nearby. I had no objection. I looked at her for a moment and told her something seemed different. She assumed I meant the way she was speaking. I told her it was her eyes. She didn't have a response for that. A faint smile appeared instead. Then she apologized for being a nuisance. She said she was done pursuing the matter. I thanked her and told her I hoped she found a good teacher. She looked at me like that was the strangest thing I could have said. Then she told me she disliked magic. To her, it was a world of politics and performance. Her efforts to recruit me had been about reputation. Mine was growing, and since I would likely end up with Lady Eileen, eventually she had decided to step aside. I asked why she hated it. She paused, said she had once liked it, then stopped herself and reconsidered. After a long silence, she said she had simply enjoyed being praised. She had never loved magic. As a child, called a genius. She had studied relentlessly. Then one day she asked herself why she was doing any of it and found she had no answer, so she stopped. Simple to say. I told her that anyone would eventually grow tired of praise alone. She seemed surprised I was actually listening. I told her safe travels. She found that annoying. Then she said I was the kind of person she was jealous of. Someone who never questioned the notion of hard work, who simply believed they would become a great mage and moved accordingly. I said nothing. She turned to leave and told me that if we met again we should say hello. I didn't argue with that. By morning, Eileen and her guard had reached the cave. From a peak above, Denise watched them go, something quietly jealous in her expression. Then she turned and walked away. Later that day at the Vault Mansion, Denise could not believe it. Eileen had been rejected, but reflecting on it, Denise said she understood my reasoning better now. It hadn't been a rejection. I simply wasn't willing to leave before I was finished. She joked that at the rate I was going, I might spend the rest of my life in that cave, and eventually resemble some legendary beast from the East. Denise turned it over in her mind, quietly wondering if I thought I was the only one who knew magic. Then a maid reminded her that a guest had arrived to share a meal with her father. She asked who it was and made her way to the dining room. She greeted her father as she entered. Then she saw me sitting beside him eating, completely unbothered as if nothing had happened. She stood there with absolutely nothing to say.